Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Election Wire DNC edition. We had so much fun back at the RNC last month that we decided to run it back, except it's the Democratic version. I am Daily Wire senior editor Cabot Phillips, joined by Daily Wire culture reporter and best-selling author. I had to include that.
That's all I answer to now.
Once you get best-selling author in your bio, you just have this certain gravitas. Her name is Megan Basham. Let's do this.
This is going to be a great night. We're going to be going live all week long, bringing you the latest coverage and analysis from the convention. So you're not going to want to go anywhere. It's going to be another wild week, and it all gets going right now with a very big kickoff night.
Yes, it's going to be crazy. On the stage tonight in Chicago, we will hear from AOC, Hillary Clinton, First Lady Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden, I want to make sure I get that right, and President Joe Biden himself. Yes, that is right. Joe Biden is still the president. A lot of people may have forgotten that. He is still the president. He will speak tonight. We want to hear what he has to say. Those speeches will be streamed live right here on Daily Wire. And of course, we'll be breaking down everything happening on stage with an all-star panel, including our own Michael Knowles. I won't let him know that I refer to him as an all-star, but he is. He will be joining us here on set in a bit. We'll also be reading all of your comments and answering your questions throughout the night. So let us know what you're thinking in the live feed.
And of course, Republicans are holding some counter programming of their own. Donald Trump will be appearing each night this week for rallies in battleground states. And we're going to bring you the highlights of those events all week long as well. And you'll hear from Republican insiders about the plan to defeat Kamala Harris.
Plus, you all know how the Daily Wire rolls. We have reporters on the ground in Chicago in the midst of everything. There's protests, there's stuff going on the floor. The entire city is all DNC right now. We've got people there. Daily Wire's Kassy Akiva and Spencer Lindquist are braving those protests to bring you the news from inside and outside the arena. We're actually going to check in with Spencer Lindquist right now.
Hey, thank you, Cabot. Thank you, Megan. This is Spencer Lindquist. We're here on the ground in Chicago. We've got a coalition of left-wing demonstrators. We're blocks away from the DNC, the convention center where it's being held. And we've got thousands of different marchers and protesters from left-wing organizations marching to shut down the DNC. Me and my colleague Kassy Akiva are going to be here on the ground, inside and outside of the DNC, all week.
So there have been arrests, there have been barricades removed. I will say I would be a little bit nervous to be out there right now, so hopefully Spencer stays safe. And certainly a big question is whether we could see a replay of those 1968-style Democratic protests. So the theme of the Democrats' convention is for the people, for our future. Tonight showcases the for the people part of that slogan. Now, Kamala Harris clearly likes this theme. It's a call back to the same one she used back when she ran for president in 2020.
She did. How did that race go? I don't remember.
You know, I don't think that one worked out for her so well that time, but she seems to think that the second time will be the charm. She actually started fundraising using this slogan the very night that President Biden announced that he would be dropping out of the race. So the DNC is arguing that Donald Trump puts himself first while they are fighting for the people. Now, is the public at home going to be convinced by that? I don't know. We will see. One of the points they're going to have to sell is that they will be better on the economy.
Yeah, the economy is the big question on a lot of people's minds. And right now we're joined by someone who knows the economy very well, Miss Carol Roth, who is a recovering, we say recovering very nicely, a recovering investment banker and New York Times bestselling author. The audience at home, you have no idea what it feels like to be flanked by two New York Times bestselling authors. I am very nervous. If I mess up, that is why. But Carol, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. And it's crazy as a Chicagoan to see everything that's going on in Chicago and all the unrest. Well, it's like any other day in Chicago. So.
Yeah, this actually might be a safer day in Chicago.
Right, exactly. At least there's a police presence and National Guard. And
yeah. So, Carol, you are an economic expert, among many other things. But let's talk about the economic aspect of this. Now, Kamala Harris has been arguing that either inflation is not actually as bad as people think, or inflation is not my fault, not Joe Biden's fault. It's the fault of corporations. What do you make of that message?
Well, I think it's what she has to do because her fingerprints are all over the Biden-Harris administration. We know that people literally cannot afford another 4 years like the last 3.5 that we had. I think what people don't appreciate is that not only is she a part of this administration, but she was the deciding vote on so many of the initiatives. There's a ties in the Senate. She broke more ties than any other VP in history. So when you go back to the American Rescue Plan, which handed out stimulus checks.
That rescued the country.
Right, that rescued the country. They didn't happen to know that something called stimulus was going to stimulate the economy. I know that was a far leap for them, but it overstimulated it and created the inflation that we have. She doesn't want to be associated with that, but she broke the tie on that. The same thing with the Inflation Reduction Act, which we know added to the deficit and really hasn't been effective in the programs that they put out either, but she put her fingerprints on those by making them the deciding vote. So the idea now that she was responsible for the financial situation, in part, of so many Americans, she has to find somebody to blame. And of course, the quote unquote for the people, it's always against the greedy corporations. And so who's the villain today.
Yeah.
So, Carol, we know that Kamala Harris gave a major economic speech recently. She endorsed price controls. That speech was widely panned by both Democrats and Republicans. And I want to take a listen really quick to what she said about something called price gauging.
Yes.
A loaf of bread costs 50% more today than it did before the pandemic. Ground beef is up almost 50%. Many of the big food companies are seeing their highest profits in 2 decades. And while many grocery chains pass along these savings, others still aren't. Look, I know most businesses are creating jobs, contributing to our economy, and playing by the rules. But some are not. And that's just not right. And we need to take action when that is the case. So believe me, as president, I will go after the bad actors. And I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food.
Okay, so whether you call it price gauging or price gouging, what's the impact of a policy like that going to be, Carol?
Oh, potato, price gauging, price gouging. What's a little gouging or gauging amongst friends? This is a price control. And we know when you have scarce economic goods, there needs to be some way to get them to people and divide them up. One way we signal that is through prices. When you put an artificial cap on prices, that usually leads to food shortages. That's why it's been a bad thing in every country that has tried it. But I think it's so interesting that of all the industries that she could have gone after, that the issues that were there, that she picks on the grocery stores. Grocery stores operate on the slimmest margins around. I think last year was 1.6% was their profit margin before taxes. And so the idea that these companies are the ones that are gouging are insane. In fact, when you go back and you look at what prices the customers are paying versus the inputs, they're actually neck and neck. I think we actually have a chart about that, the PPI versus the CPI. We're going to get a little wonky. We're going to do a little economics lesson for you guys.
This is what happens when New York Times bestselling authors are on the show.
Right. So basically, we have different indicators of inflation. The PPI is what's called wholesale inflation. So that tells you what are the cost of the inputs into goods and services. Now, if you had somebody who was price gauging or price gouging, depending on the day, you would imagine that what the consumer is then paying is much higher, right? That the retailers are making a huge margin, or maybe the food companies are making a huge margin. But if you look at this chart, you can see that the PPI and the CPI are going in lockstep. So the reason why you're paying more is because the input costs of everything are going up.
So essentially, they might be price gauging, but they're doing a very bad job of it.
They're doing a terrible job of price gauging.
Now, we've talked on the show about inflation, how the Harris and Biden administration are saying, Biden-Harris administration. Sometimes it's hard to tell which name goes first.
Again, potato.
How
right?
they're celebrating the fact that inflation, they said the war has been won because the rate of inflation has slowed. We talked on Morning Wire this week. You used a wonderful analogy about people's own personal health. Talk to us about that on kind of the true nature of inflation.
Okay, so I'm a little victim of this myself these days, but when you think about inflation and sort of their victory lap that they're taking now, I say, you know, what if you go to your doctor and you weighed in and you were doing great, and then one year you show up and you've gained 10 pounds. And the doctor is like, oh, Cabot, you know, you gotta stop eating the burgers and the shakes.
Doctor, I had a baby this year. I'm sorry, okay?
Cut it back a little bit. So the next year you show up and you've gained 7 pounds. He doesn't go, wow, you've cut that down from 10 to 7. The next year you come back and you've only gained 3 pounds. Okay, now you're up 20 pounds. You're wearing elastic waist pants because they're not fitting anymore. And he's telling you to go on a diet. They're not saying, well, great job. You started out gaining only 10 pounds one year, and now you're down to gaining 3 pounds. It's the cumulative impact. And I think that's the disconnect that we're hearing from the people who are so frustrated that not only are they experiencing this inflation, but the rhetoric has been sort of a gut punch that, you know, no, you don't understand the economics. You don't understand the charts.
You're not a New York Times bestselling author.
We understand what's going on when you go to your savings. We understand all of those things. So that's why I think we're seeing this shift from Kamala, and she's going to go, okay, that clearly wasn't working, so we have to blame someone, and we're going to make the corporations the bad guys.
Okay, well, talking about making corporations the bad guy, I want to talk a little bit about bringing identity politics into economic discussion. So we're seeing Kamala Harris now saying that she's proposing fining companies up to 1% a year if they don't meet a particular gender parity in their pay. So how would that work within the economic sector? What kind of impact would that have on companies if suddenly you have a new bureaucracy monitoring something like that?
First of all, I just think as somebody who sometimes gets categorized in business as a woman, and I'm put into this box, it's so frustrating to have that thrust upon you. Because if I'm on a company board, for example, and I'm trying to get consensus, being the person who's perceived as only there because of my identity, it makes it impossible for me to get the work done. Then you talk about the economic impact of that. You're not hiring now for the best people. And I think that that's something that we've seen all across the board in terms of business, that we've gotten away from meritocracy. And that's what the American dream is. That's what America's all about. We want the best people for the job, and it doesn't matter. We're viewing people as individuals based on their skills and their competence. So you have...
Well, let's really quickly, let's watch Kamala actually make this pitch to the American people, and I want to get your reaction.
For every 1% differential between what they are paying men and women for equal work, there will be a fine of 1% of their previous year's profits.
That obviously from her failed presidential run. It's worth pointing out, she did not garner a single vote when she ran back in 2020 because she did not even make it to the Iowa caucuses. What do you make of that pitch back then? And then I want to get to some of Joe Biden we're going to hear tonight.
Yeah, so in addition to all the things we've been talking about, just the bureaucracy that you'd have to have in order to try to gauge things and then make the argument that this person is being compensated based on this set of metrics versus another. Another thing, I'm a huge small business advocate. We got 33 plus million small businesses, backbone of this country. And every time a regulation like this comes out, who does it fall upon? It's not the big Walmarts and the Amazons that have, huge HR and legal departments. It's the small businesses. So if we want to unleash growth, if we want to grow this country, if we want to create opportunity for every person, well, then you can't have bureaucracy like that.
So let's get to Joe Biden, who, again, is still the president. He is speaking tonight. The theme that we're hearing is that he's going to be passing the torch off to the younger generation, and that he's going to be essentially...
The 60-year-old whippersnappers.
Yes.
The sprightly old 60-year-old folks are going to pass the torch right now.
Everyone seems young compared to Joe Biden, let's be
all the way
honest.
down to the boomers.
So he is going to be arguing and essentially setting up his legacy and what he has created. What do you think you're going to hear from him tonight? And is there any chance that he might take some veiled shots at Kamala Harris, who very obviously pushed him aside?
Well, there's a hope, right? The hope is that he goes scorched earth, that he just comes out and he tells all the dirty secrets, everything that's been happening, and that they have to use like one of those hooks or like, Showtime at the Apollo, the Sandman, to get him off the stage. That's my hope. I'm sure that's not what we're going to, unless Jill hacked the teleprompter, but I'm sure we're not going to hear that.
Well, we will break in when we do hear from Joe Biden, and we will get to hear what he's saying. So as soon as that comes up, we'll have it live.
Yeah, but I'm sure what he will say is that he will tell everybody that we had the greatest economy ever, that he did all of these amazing things, which he did not do, and that now it's time to pass the torch. I imagine it will be highly scripted. It will be as short as they possibly can get away with. And everyone's going to stand up and just pretend that the last 3.5 years, and by the way, the last 2 months didn't exist.
Yeah, now Kathy Hochul is getting ready to take the stage. We'll cut in if anything too crazy happens there. I think most people know the types of things that New York Governor Kathy Hochul will be saying. But it is interesting because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are in this very strange game right now. It's this delicate tightrope they're walking where if you're the Harris campaign, you might think, well, we want Joe Biden to hype up Kamala Harris. We want him getting up there saying, I'm a president and I was a great president because I had someone like Kamala Harris with me and she took hold of so many things. I gave her all these responsibilities. But then you run the risk of understanding the vast majority of the American people are not happy with this administration. But if he gets up and doesn't mention Kamala Harris and he doesn't talk about how important she is, then what experience really is she running on? What do you make of that conundrum they're in?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the delicate tap dance that they're trying to do whenever it suits them well. You know, she's incredibly experienced. She's done all of these amazing things. And then when you get into the specifics of them, the border czar, the economy, breaking these ties and putting your fingerprints on these proposals, she wants to distance herself and cast the blame elsewhere. Here's the good news for the Democrats. They're real good at mental gymnastics. They may win gold in the next Olympics. So the fact that there's the cognitive dissonance there, I don't think it matters to them. And it doesn't seem to matter to their supporters.
So what we've seen Joe Biden running on previously, before he dropped out of the race, was paying off the student loans of people who still have student loans, who went to college. And now we're seeing Kamala Harris kind of pick up at least the same theme. She's saying we're going to pass out money to people to be first-time home buyers and make a down payment on a house. So do you see any type of economic messaging coming out of this campaign other than here's some free stuff?
No, I think it's all about the free stuff. And the part to me that's so frustrating is I'm somebody when they were putting out the American Rescue Plan and they wanted to do stimulus checks after the quote unquote COVID emergency was over. I'm like, listen, we gotta stop this right now because you're going to get your $1,200, but you're going to end up paying $10,000 a year or more for the rest of your life. It's going to cost you much more than you get. And everyone went, no. And then they complain about inflation. And now it's, let's have money for homes because, we've never done things like that before, supported people who couldn't, actually afford to buy houses. That's worked out super well for this country.
Didn't happen.
Right. We're going to just wipe that out of our memory. And so the fact that we have this economically illiterate population that just wants to say, but she's helping. And then people, like us, come on, we try to explain the nuances of it and say, it sounds really good, but good intentions don't lead to good outcomes. Well, then you're the mean person. And what we're really trying to do is not only help these individuals, but help this country because we are on the precipice of a massive fiscal issue. We have 120% debt to GDP. That's like, being in a country that's going to have a sovereign debt crisis.
Now, the Democrats are really trying to make Kamala her own woman and try and keep her not attached to the Biden legacy. But an interesting thing happened this morning. The Democrat National Party posted their official platform. Now, in that official platform, at least 19 times, it seems like we're finding a new instance every hour as people read through it, at least 19 times the words Biden's second term were included. So they said, in President Biden's second term, we will continue this, and then they would have their platform. So the question is a Kamala Harris first term actually just a Biden second term?
Well, we know it is. I mean, yes, Joe Biden is quote unquote the president, but he has not been running the country for the last 3.5 years. I think that's been very apparent. So whoever it is that's running the country has now tapped somebody who is, in a better wrapping paper, but it's going to be the same policies. And who is the staffer who missed this? All you have to do is a search and replace function. This is not a difficult thing to do. But it's like they don't care. It doesn't matter to them because they're part of the team, and it doesn't matter if there's any reality. If they say there's a unicorn and a rainbow and everything's going to be happy, everyone's like, this is great. This is great. I love it.
Well, one of the ways that we can get a beat on how Americans are feeling about the economy is polling. So with that, I think we should bring in our editor-in-chief, Morning Wire editor-in-chief, Daily Wire editor-in-chief, John Bickley. So the boss is in the house.
You don't have to get up.
He's also a face of Jeremy's Razors. If you've seen any of the Jeremy's Razors ads where this man is shaving.
We talked about this. Show some shots for me.
No, don't show those. We don't want to distract from those. Now, John, we've talked quite a bit on Morning Wire about the polling reality. Now, first, before we get into this, I think a lot of people hear the word polls and they start to think, what is the point of talking about polls? They've been off so many times. What are they still useful for?
Look, they should react that way. We've been burned by polls in the past. There should be heavy skepticism. Brent Buchanan from Signal Polling Group says it well. There's some polls that you can really take stock in that the outcomes actually matter for the money-making purposes of the polling group. Some of the polls, it doesn't matter as much. And they know that they can do things for messaging purposes. So I find it fascinating. I want to step back. This is one of the most fascinating moments in political history of all time. We've never seen anything like this. We just saw a candidate win a nomination and be swapped out for somebody else. I'm actually very fascinated from the polling end to see how do the American people, do they swallow this idea that we will impose upon you a new candidate from the Democrats, and the idea that we know that Trump has a lot of headwinds in terms of polling. He's always had this. He's had kind of a ceiling that he can't get beyond, like a 47% type range. Can he compete with somebody that's kind of a generic candidate for the first at least few weeks? So this has been fascinating. What we are seeing is a reset from pre-debate polling. If you look back before the disastrous debate for Biden, it was a neck-and-neck race. It was within margin of error. The debate happens, and basically we realize the emperor has no clothes. At that point, the polls collapse for Biden. The bringing in of Kamala is like bringing in a generic Democrat candidate and resetting back to the sort of presuppositions of Republicans and Democrat voters. We know where Republicans stand in terms of Trump. The Democrats, in terms of their generic candidates, feel about like they do with Kamala Harris about anybody else that doesn't have much baggage. And the big question here, and you guys have been hitting this, is how do you define Kamala Harris fast enough that the media isn't able to basically run cover for her until the election takes place? We're weeks away from early voting, right?
Yeah.
What about the fact that there's absolutely no policy, including economic policy, the things that matter to voters on the website? I mean, do you think that you can even get an actual poll reading when somebody has completely run away from policy?
Right. No, and you can't. And so what this is generic. Do I prefer a Democrat over this particular Republican, Trump? And so what we found is there's no doubt, take all the polls together, the ones that you can really take stock, and even the ones that you feel like are for messaging, there's clear momentum for the Democrats.
Okay, we need to go in. I hate to cut you off, but Kamala Harris is apparently about to speak right now.
Oh, goodness.
Making an
So
appearance.
we're going to dip into that.
I'ma keep running 'cause the winner don't quit on themselves.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. It is so good to be with everyone this evening in this hall and everyone at home. This is going to be a great week. And I want to kick us off by celebrating our incredible President Joe Biden, who will be speaking later tonight. Joe, thank you for your historic leadership, for your lifetime of service to our nation, and for all you will continue to do. We are forever grateful to you. Thank you, Joe. And looking out at everyone tonight, I see the beauty of our great nation. People from every corner of our country and every walk of life are here, united by our shared vision for the future of our country. And this November, we will come together and declare with one voice, as one people, we are moving forward. With optimism, hope, and faith, so guided by our love of country, knowing we all have so much more in common than what separates us. Let us fight for the ideals we hold dear, and let us always remember, when we fight, we win. God bless you. God bless the United States of America. Good night, everyone.
All right,
Okay.
so there you have Kamala Harris. We weren't expecting that.
No, and I think, look, we have to contrast that a little bit with what we typically have seen from Trump out on the campaign trail, where he doesn't quite seem to know how to wrap up a quick live appearance. I think that was smart. It gets the energy up, it gets a reaction from the crowd, and then he's back off.
Although
I mean, what is your sense of that?
I will say, being in the room at the RNC, the first night when he walked into the arena post-assassination attempt, I've been to a number of sporting events, crazy ones. I've been to a number of Trump rallies. I've never felt a crowd resonate in that moment. I do think we're seeing undeniable enthusiasm. There are people, whether it's just excitement that Joe Biden's not the nominee or it's genuine excitement about Kamala Harris. But it is interesting, the juxtaposition of the way that Trump came in, the crowd going crazy, waiting until the final night to take the stage. Kamala getting up and making it about herself very quickly, reminding everyone, hey, you're going to hear from the President of the United States tonight, but don't let him upstage me. John, what do you make of that?
Very wise. And this actually comes back to the polling. Is this enthusiasm for her? Is it the enthusiasm for the lack of Biden being on the stage at that moment? And they have a new candidate, and it's somebody that's younger. Which is it? What are we experiencing? Because you're right. When Trump walked into that room, total electricity. The final night, Thursday night, everyone said it. I don't know if I've been in a room where it felt like that. That was genuine excitement. That's genuine enthusiasm, a lot of love for that guy. What are we witnessing? Is it faux? Is it fake?
Well,
what is it?
It's a lot of Hollywood shine. I think we can say that. So we've got our first actor on the stage.
Woo! Bingo!
Oh,
so maybe we
that's
can
great.
take a look at him really quick. But I mean, certainly, I don't know that he can compete with Hulk Hogan style glamour, but they do have Hollywood in the house.
Which actor is this? I'm supposed to know. We'll get to him. You guys can explain to me who this is. Let's have a listen, though, to what's being said right now.
The future of our freedom, the future of our very democracy. We will see the vision of our nominee. It is a vision of stability, security, and opportunity for everyday Americans, where we continue to grow this economy by growing the middle class, and where the safety of our children, our families, and our communities are a fundamental civil right. It is a future where, instead of scoffing at allies and fawning over dictators, our president stands up for our friends, faces down our adversaries, and American democracy remains a beacon of hope and inspires the world to take on our biggest challenges together. We'll learn the story of a leader who has dedicated her life to doing the work of making good on the promise of America. A leader who understands the middle class because she grew up in the middle class. A leader who has taken on powerful interests at every step of her career and fought for the rights and freedoms of all of us. And then, of course, we will hear again from the Democratic nominee herself, the next President of the United States of America, Kamala Harris. Because she has a message for us. It is a message that's joyful, not mean-spirited. A message of public service, not self-service. A message of optimism and opportunity, not chaos and division. A message that has woken us up to who we are, to who we've always been. Because Americans are not a cynical people. We are not small-minded. And whether we realize it right now or not, we are currently already writing a new chapter of the American story. And we can dream as big as we want. So I just want to ask you, are you excited? Yeah? Well, good. Are you ready? Okay. Well, then I challenge you to make this the moment you get off the sidelines and into the game. So I want you to text JOIN to 30330 and get involved. Because when we fight, what happens? We win. And we are going to win this thing together. And while we're doing it, we are going to have a whole lot of fun. So let's get started.
So we heard a lot there about democracy, about our democratic values, and yet we are watching a Democratic National Convention where their candidate was not chosen through a democratic process. Does that irony strike anyone?
It strikes me. The entire speech we just heard, it's about democracy, our leader's vision. We don't know what her platform is. It's not even on the website. This is about fun. This is about being on the winning team. It doesn't matter what it is. It's put a placeholder in for the latest thing, and everybody's going, yay, this is it. And they have no idea what it is, but they're on the right team, and that's all that matters.
John, talk to us about the impact of the media in this election, because Kamala Harris, famously, infamously at this point, has not held a sit-down interview or press conference since she became the nominee, and yet her favorability ratings have completely reversed from where she was. She was more unpopular than Joe Biden, which is a feat in and of itself, and now she's climbing. How much of the media is at play there?
It's remarkable. The turnaround in terms of her polling is remarkable. It can only be done with a fawning media. I was thinking back to the Obama presidency. They fawned over him in a way that I thought could never be replicated. I think this is actually more extreme. Never would they completely sacrifice what it is that they're put on earth to do, what they're getting paid to do, which is actually to be journalists, in a way that's like even the most basic way, to have interviews. Even for a profit perspective, you want to have Kamala on your show so that you can get more viewers. You want these big interviews. They're completely willing to sacrifice this. There's been very, very little and very insincere pushback on this. We've heard a few on CNN.
Right.
We heard a little bit of like, well, we've asked her. And that's about it. But no one's upset about this.
And John,
it's remarkable.
What about the role of the media in terms of taking similar proposals and couching them in such a different manner? You have something like Trump's "I'm not going to tax tips for service workers," which was the worst idea ever until Kamala stole it, and then it was the most genius thing that they'd ever heard of economically.
I'm confused. Do you think it's a good idea, or do you think it's
I think it requires a lot of nuance.
Okay,
but absolutely,
guys,
I've seen this.
I don't want to cut you off, but I have the moment right now that I'm more excited for than anything else, and that is our new touchscreen wall. So I'm going to run over here. Now, guys, for you at home, I have been on bended knee asking Jeremy Boring to order me one of these fancy touchscreens, and it's finally here. I hope all of you at home one day are as excited about a thing as I am about this touchscreen. And the good news is all of you at home get to do what I'm about to do, because the Daily Wire homepage, which we got right here, now has our election hub. Go click that up there on the homepage, and you guys can come down to this nifty map, and you can run through the possible outcomes for this election. So you can click different states, see who wins. Let's see who can get to 270 electoral votes. So we're just going to do a quick run through some potential and feasible paths to victory for each side. So if you look at battleground polling right now, everyone talks about national polling. It's understandable. National polls do not matter, though. All that matters in the end are these 6 battleground states, and really it can be 7 battleground states. North Carolina, technically right now, is a leans Republican state, according to most pollsters. But in the past few weeks, we have seen the polling narrow greatly. It's now about a 2-point lead for Donald Trump. So really, it's these 7 battleground states. The Sun Belts and Southeast are one, and the Rust Belts in the Midwest are the other. So as far as potential paths to victory, the most likely one for Donald Trump, let's start with those. The state that seems safest for him, North Carolina, but again, that is still kind of a toss-up right now. The second most likely state where he's polling strongly right now, Nevada, which is a bit of a surprise. The last 50 years, it's been much more of a blue state, but with the border crisis going on, more and more voters concerned by immigration are going to Trump. So next after that, Georgia is where he's polling the strongest, but again, it's very close. He's only up by 1 percentage point nationally. The 2020 race, fewer than 50,000 Georgia voters decided that race. It's going to be very close again. But if Trump is able to win those 3 states, North Carolina, Georgia, and Nevada, that leaves Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. So Arizona is the state, again, where he is up right now, but it's only by about 0.2 points in the Real Clear Politics average. So let's say he gets Arizona. He's still at 268 votes. You need 270 to win. So if he gets these 4 states, which again, he's polling fairly well in right now, he would need to win one of the 3 Rust Belt states. The one that seems most likely right now is Pennsylvania. Right now, the average of polls there is a 0.1, 0.1% advantage for Trump. It is a true toss-up. But if he is able to win these Sun Belt and Southeastern states where he's been polling well, relatively speaking, throughout the last year, he has been ahead in all of those. He is right now as well. And then he can pick up one of these 3 states. Donald Trump will be the president. The Democrats can win Michigan and Wisconsin. They're still only at 251. Now, the clear Democrat path to victory here, it's their blue wall. They have been talking all along about the blue wall in the Midwest. Donald Trump won all 3 of these states in 2016. Joe Biden won all 3 of them in 2020. Who will win them in 2024? If the Democrats are able to win all 3 of these states, Republicans can win the other 4 battleground states in the southern part of the country. It doesn't matter because the Democrats will still get to 270 on the dot. This outcome is very, very possible. This could certainly happen, and this would be the closest race that we've ever had in modern political history. Now, I want to give you guys a fun example of something that very well could happen. If Democrats win Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, and if Republicans win Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, oh, no, never mind, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and North Carolina. Hold on, this is live TV. This is what happens. So we give the Democrats Georgia. Look what happens here. If Democrats win Wisconsin, Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, Republicans win Pennsylvania, Michigan, North Carolina, it is a tie. 269 to 269. This will be the first time that's ever happened.
It will happen.
And it very well could happen. This is not completely out of the realm of possibility. Now, if we do get stuck at 269, what happens? We would go to the House of Representatives, where the House would vote for the next president of the United States. Republicans hold the advantage, but it's not a clear vote of the 535 members. It is a vote of the majority of each state. So whoever gets 26 states there. And then you know what would happen after that? I know you're wondering at home. I don't hear anyone wondering here because you guys are all smart. You already know this. I did not know this until After that, the House decides the president. It's the Senate that decides the vice president. So if you get 51 votes, Democrats have 51 votes. There could be a situation where there is a different party holding the presidency and the vice presidency. Very unlikely. But again, if this situation plays out, it would go to Congress to decide the next president. Something very crazy, very fun, maybe fun for certain people, depending on who it is. So if you go back here to the Daily Wire homepage, you guys can see, what is this? Matt Walsh's movie, Am I Racist, just happened to pop up here on the screen. Look at that. You can go watch the trailer. Megan, did you plant this here? How did Am I Racist, the Matt Walsh movie, get up here?
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but remember that incredible film that asked another question, what is a woman? Well, Matt Walsh got the same group of white guys back together to ask America's next burning question, am I racist? It's coming to theaters September 13th. Matt Walsh went deep undercover into the cesspool of DEI insanity, rubbing elbows with professional race hustlers and diversity con artists. Some would say he did the work. Now it's your turn to do the work. Advance tickets are on sale now, and here's why that's so important. Every ticket sold today determines how many theaters will show Am I Racist, the Daily Wire's first theatrical release on September 13th. It's simple economics, as Carol could tell you. Get all the details and watch the official trailer at www.amiracist.com. And now here's a sneak peek.
Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up, I never thought much about race. It never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me. Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey. If I'm going to sort this out, I need to go deeper undercover.
They gon' say I'm racist. Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Here's my certifications. And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you in this field. Is America inherently racist?
The word inherent is challenging there.
I want to rename the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument.
America is racist to its bones.
So inherently.
Yeah, this country is a piece of
White.
folks, white trash, white supremacy, white woman, white boy.
Is there a black person around? What's a black person right here? Does he not exist?
Say I'm racist.
Hi, Robin.
Hi, what's your name?
I'm Matt.
Just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
They gon' say you racist.
Buy your tickets now. In theaters September 13th. Rated PG-13.
That looks absolutely fantastic. I do love the marketing, Megan, of saying from the same white guys, and I could feel everyone in the room look at John and myself, and it felt a little bit of identity politics going on that you're throwing around at us. I don't know. But that is going to be a lot of fun. Now, Sean Fain, right now from the United Auto Workers, is taking the stage.
Speaking of white guys, yes.
Speaking of white guys, we'll get to him if there's anything crazy that happens. But let's talk more broadly about what we expect to hear from President Biden tonight. You know, they're saying this is going to be him hammering in his legacy. Do we think that voters are going to be able to separate what they've lived in the last 4 years from what they're hearing from Kamala Harris?
Well, I think in terms of Biden, it sort of doesn't matter. I mean, they're happy that he's gone out the door. You know, George Clooney did the op-ed and then it was over because George Clooney said he couldn't be there any longer. So I do think that there is this cognitive dissonance. I think that they're going to say, oh, well, this is a fresh start. We're going forward. Forward to where? Doesn't really matter. It's a vision. A vision of what? It doesn't matter. It's a vision. And they're going to buy into the hype and the fun because that's really all they've had to sell. And again, with Kamala trying to distance herself from the policies, blaming corporations, everybody else for the economy, pretending she wasn't the border czar, I think that people who want to buy into that cult-like belief, that they're going to do it.
That's an interesting point. The people that want to buy into that, and I think there is an alarming number of people that really do want to buy the narrative.
Yeah.
They want it. There's a comfort in the narrative. And I think there is a comfort in saying, you know what? He wasn't a selfish man seeking basically the wealth aggregation of his family. He was self-sacrificial. He is Cincinnatus. We do have good leadership. I want to believe that my vote was for good leaders. You actually want to believe the guy's a good guy. They don't want to believe the reality and see the reality of the reports, the investigations that the Congress has released. They don't actually want that. And there's a sense of unity about sort of embracing a fantasy.
And the media lies to that.
I was going to say, is all of that destroyed once she has to give interviews, though? Because this cannot continue indefinitely. We are a month now with no interviews.
Which, by the way, Politico is reporting, or Axios was reporting, that close aides to Kamala have said that it could be until after Labor Day that she does her first interview.
I mean, if you had an independent free press that did their jobs, that were journalists back, you know, the way journalists were many, many decades ago, then yes, that would be a separate issue. But we don't have that in the corporate press. We have cheerleaders. We have advocates. They want the Democrats to win. They don't care who's out front.
Okay, so let's talk about, if you're the Republicans then, and you know they're just going to try to run another basement candidate, what do you do? What do you do to try to force her out, to try to force her to engage these policies? What does the Trump campaign do?
I mean, what I would do if it were me, I think you have to really stay focused on clear messaging. It's about the economy, it's about the border, and it's about our standing in the world. And you have to say that over and over again. These were Kamala Harris's policies. These were the ones that she voted to break the tie on. These are the same people who are in charge. They swapped her out. You cannot afford 4 more years of this over and over and over again.
You said that earlier.
Yeah.
Can America afford this? And I think it comes down to individuals asking, can I afford this?
Yeah.
That is a winning message. It is very hard. You're working against a lockstep media like never before. I mean, it's remarkable how in step they are.
We're going to get to we're going to get to Sean Fain. He's ripped off a very interesting shirt. Let our viewers have a look at what Sean Fain is now wearing. United Auto Workers head.
If they cut that.
It's hot in here. It's hot in here because you're fired up and you're fed up, and the American working class is fired up and fed up. The American working class is in a fight for our lives. And if you don't believe me, just last night, blue-collar workers, the UAW members at Cornell University had to walk out on strike for a better life because they're fighting corporate greed. And our only hope is to attack corporate greed head on. Corporate greed turns blue-collar blood, sweat, and tears into Wall Street stock buybacks and CEO jackpots. It causes inflation. It hurts workers. It hurts consumers, and it hurts America. And corporate greed is alive and well in the auto industry. You know, last fall, we achieved life-changing gains in our strike at the Big Three. We even won a commitment to reopen a closed plant not too far from here. We were able to do that thanks to the support of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and the thousands of auto workers that went on strike. But a year later, one company wants to go back on their commitments in our contract. And let me be clear, Stellantis must keep the promises they made to America in our union contract. And the UAW will take whatever action necessary at Stellantis or any other corporation to stand up and hold corporate America accountable. And when the UAW stands up, we know who stands with us and who stands against us. Donald Trump laughs about firing workers who go on strike. And Kamala Harris stands shoulder to shoulder with workers when they're on strike. And that's the difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump the scab. Trump is pushing divide and conquer tactics of the rich. It's the oldest trick in the book. They want to blame the frustrations of working class people. They want to take those frustrations, they want to blame it on race. They want to blame it on LGBTQ plus people. They want to blame it on some destitute and desperate person at the border. They do that because they want working class people to be divided and to focus and keep the focus off the one true enemy, corporate greed. The rich think we're stupid. But working class Americans see this for what it is. This is our generation's defining moment. So I have a question for you. Are you ready to stand up, speak up, and show up and put Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the White House? We need a defender of the working class in the White House, someone who is one of us and someone who knows how to fight. And that fighter is the next president of the United States, Kamala Harris. Thank you.
I guess that was the Hulk Hogan moment of the DNC. Little reveal there.
Yeah, I think he needs to get on whatever Hulk Hogan is on as well. We're going to get right back because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is taking the stage. Let's hear from the New York Congresswoman.
Thank you, Chicago! Thank you, Chicago, for your energy. Thank you, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, for your vision. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chicago, for your energy. Thank you, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, for your vision. And thank you, Joe Biden, for your leadership. You know, 6 years ago, I was taking omelet orders as a waitress in New York City. I didn't have health insurance. My family was fighting off foreclosure, and we were struggling with bills after my dad passed away unexpectedly from cancer. Like millions of Americans, we were just looking for an honest shake. And we were tired of a cynical politics that seemed blind to the realities of working people. It was then, only through the miracles of democracy and community, that the good people of the Bronx and Queens chose someone like me to elect them in Congress. And America, in my heart, I know from that same cloth of hope and aspiration, we will also elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz as President and Vice President of the United States of America. I am here tonight because America has before us a rare and precious opportunity. In Kamala Harris, we have a chance to elect a president who is for the middle class because she is from the middle class. She understands the urgency of rent checks and groceries and prescriptions. She is as committed to our reproductive and civil rights as she is to taking on corporate greed. And she is working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and bringing hostages home. In Kamala Harris, I see a leader who understands. I see a leader with a real commitment to a better future for working families. And Chicago, we have to help her win. Because we know that Donald Trump would sell this country for $1 if it meant lining his own pockets and greasing the palms of his Wall Street friends. And I, for one, am tired of hearing about how a two-bit union buster thinks of himself as more of a patriot than the woman who fights every single day to lift working people out from under the boots of greed, trampling on our way of life. The truth is, Don, you cannot love this country if you only fight for the wealthy and big business. To love this country is to fight for its people, all people, working people, everyday Americans like bartenders and factory workers and fast food cashiers who punch a clock and are on their feet all day in some of the toughest jobs out there. You know, ever since I got elected, Republicans have attacked me by saying that I should go back to bartending. But let me tell you, I'm happy to any day of the week because there is nothing wrong with working for a living. Imagine having leaders in the White House who understand that. Leaders like Kamala and Tim. But Chicago, just because the choice is clear to us does not mean that the path will be easy. Over the next 78 days, we will have to pour every ounce, every minute, every moment into making history on November 5th. But we cannot send Kamala and Tim to the White House alone. Together, we must also elect strong Democratic majorities in the House and in the Senate so that we can deliver on an ambitious agenda for the people. Because if you are a working parent trying to afford rent and childcare, Kamala is for you. If you are a senior who had to go back to work because your retirement didn't stretch far enough, Kamala is for you. If you're an immigrant family just starting your American story, Kamala is for you. America, when we knock on our neighbor's door, organize our communities, and elect Kamala Harris to the presidency on November 5th, we will send a loud message that the people of this nation will not go back. We choose a new path and open the door to a new day, one that is for the people and by the people. Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless. God bless you all.
Taking the stage there, we kept hearing this term over and over, vision. We heard her talk about the agenda of Kamala Harris, which, again, it is worth pointing out. If you go to Kamala Harris's campaign website, you will find a merch tab, you will find a donate tab, you will not find a policy tab. I think that is worth discussing.
I love the fact that they're just leaning into every problem that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden created and pretending they had nothing to do with it. They're literally saying, the arsonist who burnt your house down is going to rebuild it for you. Aren't you excited? This is our vision. This is our way forward. Join us. Things are going to be so much better for you. And the fact that they just want to gaslight over and over again, it's staggering. I feel like I'm in an Orwell novel.
Democrats are good at defining the enemy, corporate greed, clearly Donald Trump. Very simple.
Yeah.
That's the message we've heard.
But do you think it's a little bit different, though? I know they had their union guy there, but this time, so did the Republicans. They had their union guy.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a challenging one to win. If I were the Trump campaign, I would be pivoting to small business and gig workers and independent contractors because those who are really the people who've been left behind, and they're huge constituencies. Small businesses, more than 33 million. Gig workers, 70 million. You should be talking about those people as the middle and working class. There's a couple million people in the couple biggest unions. Go after the small business owners. They're the ones that feel left behind.
Yeah. Is it energizing for the average American to hear about strikes and picket lines?
Yeah, I think that ultimately voters will decide that. And we are going to have a lot more coming your way. For now, though, we're going to have to say goodbye to John Bickley.
Yes,
John, thank you so much for coming on.
A lot of fun.
Can go listen to John, and I might be on the show as well. Tomorrow morning on Morning Wire, John Bickley, Daily Wire editor-in-chief and host of Morning Wire. Thank you again very much, John. Now, we have a ton more happening tonight. Everyone, stay with us in the comment section. Let us know questions you have. We'll be getting to some of those a
Michael
little bit later.
Knowles, too, will be joining us.
Michael Knowles will be coming here very shortly. We'll say all of the nice things about him now before he gets here so we don't have to say them to his face. Michael's very smart. He's going to have expert analysis. He's part of our all-star panel. And then when he gets here, all of you in the comment section can let him know how you really feel about him. That'll be a lot of fun. But next up, we have Hillary Clinton preparing to take the stage. Carol, what are we expecting to hear? If we talk a lot about vibes, how this is a vibes election, what's the vibe for Hillary Clinton right now in her green room?
I just would love to be a fly on the wall, because these are all of the very bitter losers who are coming out tonight, right? This was supposed to be Hillary's moment. She was going to be the first woman president, and now you've got Kamala being pushed in as potentially someone who could take that crown. You have Joe Biden, who's been replaced. I mean, if we got the actual replay of what they were thinking versus what they were forced to say, it would be much more entertaining.
Well, we started to get a lot of comments, and a lot of people seem to be feeling what you're feeling, Carol. They're saying things about that this is entirely a vibes campaign. Yeah. Artemis 15 says this makes the woke speeches in high school debate sound bearable. That sounds a little bit like what you were saying while she was talking. I will say there was a little chatter going on. If I can repeat,
it does really feel like when you hear AOC speak, as if somebody's running for class president and they're promising you, free pizza and no homework, instead of, hey, this is serious. Like, we're the leading country in the world and we're electing the person who's going to be our commander in chief. That's not what this sounds like.
Now, one thing that's interesting, there's a video that was just rolling on the convention floor of Kamala Harris, and it was showing her record as a prosecutor, talking about how strong she went after criminals. And they're saying she went after criminals. She can now go after Donald Trump. But it is an interesting juxtaposition between what we heard and saw from Kamala Harris in 2020 when she was raising money for the bail funds of Black Lives Matter rioters in Minneapolis, when she was, offering tacit support at least for the defund the police movement, and this now abrupt shift to actually law and order. Actually, law and order is a good thing. Actually, some people do need to be in jail, and I was a strong prosecutor. What do you make of that contrast that we've seen in 4 years?
I mean, she's the anything candidate. It depends on the day, and it depends on what we're talking about. She's going to be tough, but she's going to be filled with joy. They're angry, and they're going to fight, but no, we're going to bring everybody together. I mean, none of this makes any sense. If you really part and parcel what they're saying and put it together, you'd be completely horrified, which is my feeling as I'm watching this. But that's what people are internalized. They're picking and choosing. It's almost like, here's a buffet of things that Kamala Harris can be, whatever suits you. If you want this piece of her, you can have that. If you want this piece of her, you can have that.
Okay, but on some level, at least when we were talking about the polling, it's not a blowout. It is very tight. So why does it seem to be working when there's arguably such an empty vessel of a campaign here?
I think it just goes back to being on a team. They have Hollywood, they have the media, they've got the pop culture. It's perceived, whether we agree or not, in the zeitgeist that this is the cool, these are the right people to be aligned with. And I think that as people who have different visions have been gone after, I think people are afraid to kind of connect with that. There can also be, seriously, a disconnect with reality. I mean, things have been so awful for people for the last few years. People need to believe that it's going to get better. And so perhaps some of that belief is seeping in. Oh, they've changed the candidate. They're going to go in a different direction, even though we all know realistically that's not the case.
Yeah, so I want to get now to Grace Curley, host of the Grace Curley Show up in Boston. Grace, you've been watching what's going on tonight. Hillary Clinton about to take the stage. AOC just coming off the stage. What do you make of the messaging that we're hearing so far from Harris surrogates in Chicago?
Well, I was actually kind of surprised how Trump-focused the night has been thus far. I really thought there was going to be a push to make it all about Kamala Harris. And thus far, it's been kind of focused on Joe Biden and the past, but also just hammering Donald Trump. And what that makes me think is that as much as there's been kind of this vibe shift that they all keep talking about, that everything's happy, happy, joy, joy now, that as a candidate, they know she's not as strong as maybe the media is making her out to be. So there's been a lot of talk of COVID, of 2020, playing these montages of voters saying that Trump's not nice to women. It all feels very tired to me. And it makes me think that maybe this sugar rush that we've been experiencing over the last couple of weeks is about to definitely reach a peak and then probably crash.
Grace, we're so sorry to cut you off. We'll get back to you, but Hillary Clinton is about to take the stage. Let's go back to Chicago. We'll have more from Grace later.
so much. Thank you. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you, my fellow Democrats. Thank you, my fellow Americans. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you so much. Wow. There's a lot of energy in this room, just like there is across the country. Something is happening in America. You can feel it. Something we've worked for and dreamed of for a long time. First, though, let's salute President Biden. He has been democracy's champion at home and abroad. He brought dignity, decency, and competence back to the White House. And he showed what it means to be a true patriot. Thank you, Joe Biden, for your lifetime of service and leadership. And now we are writing a new chapter in America's story. You know, my mother Dorothy was born right here in Chicago before women had the right to vote. That changed 104 years ago yesterday. Think about it. Tennessee became the final state to ratify the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. The state legislature was deadlocked until one lawmaker's mother, a widow who read 3 newspapers a day, sent a letter to her son. "No more delays," she wrote. "Give us the vote." And since that day, every generation has carried the torch forward. In 1972, a fearless black congresswoman named Shirley Chisholm she ran for president. And her determination let me and millions of others dream bigger, not just because of who she was, but because of who she fought for. Working parents, poor children, the last, the least, and the lost. In 1980, 1984, I brought my daughter to see Geraldine Ferraro, the first woman nominated for vice president. If we can do this, Jerry said, we can do anything. And then there was 2016, when it was the honor of my life to accept our party's nomination for president. And nearly 66 million Americans voted for a future where there are no ceilings on our dreams. And afterwards, we refused to give up on America. Millions marched, many ran for office. We kept our eyes on the future. Well, my friends, the future is here. I wish my mother and Kamala's mother could see us. They would say, keep going. Shirley and Jerry would say, keep going. Women fighting for reproductive health care are saying, keep going. Families building better lives. Parents stretching to afford child care. Young people struggling to pay their rent. They're all asking us to keep going. So, with faith in each other and joy in our hearts, let's send Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to the White House. The story of my life and the history of our country is that progress is possible, but not guaranteed. We have to fight for it and never, ever give up. There is always a choice. Do we push forward or pull back? Come together as we the people, or split into us versus them? That's the choice we face in this election. Kamala has the character, experience, and vision to lead us forward. I know her heart and her integrity. We both got our start as young lawyers, helping children who were abused and neglected. That kind of work changes a person. Those kids stay with you. Kamala carries with her the hopes of every child she protected, every family she helped, every community she served. So as president, she will always have our backs, and she will be a fighter for us. She will fight to lower costs for hardworking families, open the doors wide for good-paying jobs, and yes, she will restore abortion rights nationwide. As a prosecutor, Kamala locked up murderers and drug traffickers. She will never rest in defense of our freedom and safety. Donald Trump fell asleep at his own trial, and when he woke up, he made his own kind of history, the first person to run for president with 34 felony convictions. As Vice President, Kamala sat in the Situation Room. We also know, as Vice President, Kamala sat in the Situation Room and stood for America's values. I know what it takes, and I can tell you, as Commander-in-Chief, Kamala won't disrespect our military and our veterans. She reveres our Medal of Honor recipients. She won't be sending love letters to dictators. She will defend democracy and our Constitution and will protect America from enemies, foreign and domestic. Think about it. The Constitution says the president's job is to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Those are the words of our founders. Take care. Just look at the candidates. Kamala cares about kids and families, cares about America. Donald only cares about himself. On her first day in court, Kamala said 5 words that still guide her. Kamala Harris, for the people. That is something that Donald Trump will never understand. So it is no surprise, is it, that he is lying about Kamala's record. He's mocking her name and her laugh. Sounds familiar. But we have him on the run now. So, no matter what the polls say, we can't let up. We can't get driven down crazy conspiracy rabbit holes. We have to fight for the truth. We have to fight for Kamala as she will fight for us. Because you know what? It still takes a village to raise a family, heal a country, and win a campaign. And America needs every one of us. Our energy, our talents, our dreams. We're not just electing a president, we're uplifting our nation. We're opening the promise of America wide enough for everyone. Together, we've put a lot of cracks in the highest, hardest glass ceiling. And tonight, so close to breaking through once and for all, I want to tell you what I see through all those cracks and why it matters for each and every one of us. What do I see? I see freedom. I see the freedom to make our own decisions about our health, our lives, our loves, our families. The freedom to work with dignity and prosper, to worship as we choose or not, to speak our minds freely and honestly. I see freedom from fear and intimidation, from violence and injustice, from chaos and corruption. I see the freedom to look our children in the eye and say, in America, you can go as far as your hard work and talent will take you, and mean it. And you know what? On the other side of that glass ceiling is Kamala Harris raising her hand and taking the oath of office as our 47th President of the United States. Because, my friends, when a barrier falls for one of us, it falls. It falls and clears the way for all of us. So for the next 78 days, we need to work harder than we ever have. We need to beat back the dangers that Trump and his allies pose to the rule of law and our way of life. Don't get distracted or complacent. Talk to your friends and neighbors. Volunteer. Be proud champions for the truth and for the country that we all love. I want my grandchildren and their grandchildren to know I was here at this moment, that we were here, and that we were with Kamala Harris every step of the way. This is our time, America. This is when we stand up. This is when we break through. The future is here. It's in our grasp. Let's go win it.
All right, there you have it. Former Secretary of State and almost President of the United States, Hillary Clinton, speaking at the DNC in Chicago. One interesting thing, her standing ovation when she came out was longer than the standing ovation that Kamala Harris got when she made her first appearance.
Much longer. It felt much longer.
Much longer. She kept trying to talk. The crowd kept cutting in and cheering. And just watching that, it is interesting the contrast between, in 2016, when Hillary Clinton ran, she was almost undoubtedly the most far-left Democratic nominee that we've ever seen. Now, when she speaks on this stage, she seems almost stuffy and almost establishment. It shows how far the party has come. I wish I could steal that idea for myself. My wife actually texted me saying that, and now I'm repeating what she said because it is a very good point. So there you go, honey. That you get credit for that. But what do you make of that shift in the party where how much further left Kamala Harris is and the base of the Democratic Party is than they were in 2016.
Yeah, I mean, even Joe Biden was put out as a moderate, and we saw how progressive he is. We know that Kamala is to the left of him. And she has like the Bernie Sanders candidate as the VP. So obviously they've gone way far to the left.
Okay, well, I want to bring in Grace Curley to get in on this conversation because one of the things that I noticed, if we can bring Grace in, was how we seem to be seeing, hi, Grace, a little bit of a ghost of feminism's past there in Hillary's speech. And that was really the first appeal to what's become really the only key policy that we have heard from the Democrats so far, and that is on the question of abortion. So, one, I wonder what you think, Grace. Is this effective? Is it motivating that voter base? Clearly motivating people in the convention hall. But does anybody anymore think that the Democrats are too extreme when they hear about abortion policies up to birth, when they hear about Planned Parenthood health mobiles there on the premises providing abortions and vasectomies? Does any of this strike anybody as too extreme anymore?
I wonder if Republicans are doing a good enough job of pointing it out. I remember in the GOP debate where Nikki Haley was asked about her position. I think it was on Fox, but it was the one that Trump was not a part of. And she was asked about her position on abortion, and she said she quickly pivoted to what about the Democrats' position on abortion? And it's a smart thing to do because, to your point, extremes don't play well on this issue. So I don't think Republicans have done a good enough job at highlighting just how extreme someone like Hillary Clinton is. And she's able to kind of throw out these euphemisms about women's rights and, breaking through the glass ceiling without ever having to get specific about what she's actually talking about. And so it sounds okay in a speech, but I think for the average American, if they really knew what Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris and the rest of these so-called feminists are promoting, they might be turned off by it.
Grace, I want to talk to you about the shift that we've seen in recent years where women were always tended to be more Democrat in modern politics than men, but that disparity has only grown further in the last 4 years. What do you view as the reason why women are around 10 to 15% more likely to identify as Democrats than men? Is it just abortion? Is it, what is it?
I think a lot of it, I think part of it is abortion. I think part of it is culture. I think a lot of strong women, or at least people that we are told are strong women in media and in Hollywood, I do think that they tend to be very far left. There's not a lot of voices out there. I mean, I, for one, am always looking for conservative females in any facet of life to kind of look to, because it seems like there's just really no one who's giving that side of the story. I guess it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, where there are people out there, I think, who we could win over, but it's hard to get the messaging through when so much of the media and so much of what we see every day is dominated by this far left stance. And then also keep in mind that, when I was in school, I graduated from college in 2014, and I look back at that time and I kind of just missed the mark of when everything went really progressive in schools and the indoctrination was kind of full force. I think a lot of young women who are now, able to vote, they haven't experienced anything but that indoctrination. So they never really heard a different point of view. And I think that has to play into it too, education and how people are being raised nowadays.
Grace, it's Carol Roth. How much do you think the idea of making history plays in? Because we saw Hillary lean into that. This is an opportunity to make history, and that was obviously such a big thing for people voting for Barack Obama. Do you think people, want to put the policies aside and just be part of something because it's a cultural moment?
Carol, the idea of that kills me. Like when people say it's the vibes, it's a vibe shift, and it makes me feel happy, and she laughs and she, cooks and she does all these things. You have to leave that aside. You have to go in. I mean, just look at the state of the world right now. The stakes are way too high. And the same people who were telling you in the last election, oh, I just want to vote for someone so we restore normalcy, are the people now telling you, oh, I just want to vote because she seems nice and Trump's so mean. You have to separate or compartmentalize your feelings about these people from what you actually know about their policies. And in the case of Kamala Harris, it's not much. I mean, I think that's a huge reason. I was just watching that speech by Hillary Clinton. Very few mentions of Kamala and of what she actually stands for. Did anyone notice that? It was like the focus was on, at one point she said the story of my life, which I thought was like, whoa, you're here to introduce other people and you're talking about the story of your life. It's very Hillary Clinton, but also it's as if she's there. Every time I see Hillary Clinton, it's as if she's there to remind me that she lost in 2016. I remember, I think we all remember. I don't think we've ever had a chance to forget. So I don't think that there's a lot there for them to promote about Kamala. So they're just making it about themselves or about, like you said, these ideas of breaking through glass ceilings or feeling good when you vote for someone, or that she's going to be the first this or the first that. And I don't know if that's going to resonate with people. I think that there's too many kitchen table issues right now that are suffocating the average American.
Well, Ben Shapiro of the Daily Wire has weighed in on Twitter. Make sure to go keep up with his feed tonight. He just tweeted, Hillary is revealing the truth. This is not about joy. It's about revenge and hatred. Always was. Harris is just a better tool to achieve it than Biden. Grace, what do you make of that message that, and I would encourage you to agree with it or else Ben might hop on here and destroy you with facts and logic, so be very careful. But what do you make of that message that this entire speech and really this convention is about revenge?
Yeah, she really was. Hillary Clinton is like bitterness personified. I did get that vibe, to use the word, from her speech. And also, imagine how bitter she must be looking at the Kamala Harris and looking at a successful coup. We know she tried a coup of her own and it wasn't as popular. It didn't really work. But then also, you want to talk about bitterness and the revenge and all of this stuff. How rich is it? And I would ask this of Ben Shapiro, how rich is it that Hillary Clinton is up on that stage lecturing Kamala Harris and lecturing other Democrats on how to work hard? This is the woman who didn't go to Wisconsin. She's like, we can't rely on polls. We can't rely on this or that. Yeah, you would know because you did rely on it and you lost. And I just think there's so much of these characters who get up there during this DNC thus far. It's only day one. There is a real sense of bitterness and anger. And I think that sometimes they're mad that, it wasn't them that, like, look at Hillary Clinton. She actually had to win a primary. You know what I mean? And she must be looking at Kamala going, this isn't fair. I didn't have all this. And, I was expected to do a lot more. So I think he's on the money.
I got to interrupt you, though, but didn't that actually happen with Bernie Sanders? Like, wasn't he the one that was coming out in front? So I don't know that that's actually true. I think that there was a little bit of a coup there in the primaries going on.
Yeah, you know what? She did have one coup under her belt. She just didn't have the second one, which I think was just as important to her. But it's crazy. I mean, I was watching this speech that she was giving, and I just thought, you remember why she wasn't able to connect with people, because it's a combination of being, what Barack Obama might call a bitter clinger. And also the other factor is that she's an egomaniac. She makes it all about herself and she makes it all about her loss and how she hates Donald Trump. And that was one other thing I would throw in. Every compliment, and they did this with Joe Biden in 2020, they never really gave Kamala Harris a compliment. It was just a pot shot at Donald Trump. Did you notice that? So if they talk about how she appreciates veterans, it's really just a way to take a dig at how Hillary doesn't think Donald Trump appreciates veterans, or Kamala Harris understands what it's like, but Donald Trump doesn't. It's like a ex-girlfriend who can't not talk about her boyfriend, like always has to bring him up in conversation. She can't even give a genuine compliment to this woman who we're all supposed to get behind because she's so wonderful without bringing up the orange man in the room.
So it's a little like the passive-aggressive divorced parent.
Exactly. That's exactly what it's like. And I think people can understand that, because I always remember in 2020 with Joe Biden, I thought, even when he won, even when, November 7th, when the news stations declared that it was Joe Biden was going to be president and everyone took to the streets, they took the masks off, Chuck Schumer had the bullhorn. Even then, it wasn't about Joe. The cheers were about Trump, get out of New York or get out of here or you lost. And they really are coming back to that. That's the rallying cry. We can talk about abortion, we can talk about feminism, but I think that the only real message that they can unify around is how much they hate Donald Trump. And that's what I'm not sure is going to be enough this time around. I don't know if you can get that same level of hatred when people have so much other things on their plate to worry about. And they're counting on it. I think it's really all they have.
So do you think that the Trump campaign, though, in this moment is doing enough to define Kamala and to define that campaign?
Well, that's the funny part about defining Kamala, is because when Trump does take shots at her, whether it be, some immature stuff, or we know that Trump sometimes likes to, take a low blow, and people say, well, he's making it about her personality. I get texts all the time about this. He's got to stay on the issues. He's got to stay on the issues. He's got to stay on policy. And I get that, but then I think to myself, well, she doesn't have any policies. Like, her website's empty. What is he supposed to make it about? I mean, they want to make it, the left wants to make it about her great personality. And then he says, I don't think she has that great of a personality. And all of a sudden he's the bad guy. I'm very confused by the way the media, I shouldn't say I'm confused because I've seen this a million times before, but they are okay with her not standing for anything. I've really never seen this in my life, where someone is expected to just kind of have these vague, kind of ever-changing views and everyone else goes along with it and doesn't really pin them down to anything. So in a lot of ways, Trump has a challenge here that I'm sure he'll be able to figure it out, but he definitely has to recalibrate now that it's not Joe Biden, because they're giving her a pass in a way that I don't think anyone could have expected.
Grace, the interesting thing is it's almost like they've waved the little Men in Black memory eraser and erase the fact that we've lived under a Trump presidency. It's like
millions
talking
of
to
people died.
Yeah,
Carol.
yeah.
The economy oh, never mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's the part that stands out to me is all the Trump campaign has to say. You had a presidency with me before COVID. You had one with Biden-Harris after COVID. When was your life better? And just say that over and over again. But the Democrats want to erase what happened before 2020.
Yeah, but it's even crazier than that because, yes, they want to erase what happened before 2020. And we always know they like to hold up the Men in Black thing, as you said, and try to, they think we're all goldfish. But it's crazy how much time is shrinking that you're expected to remember. Like it used to be forget 4 years ago, and now it's forget 4 days ago. Like think about it. A month ago, they were telling us, Joe Biden is very Socratic. And when he's behind the scenes, he's filling out the chalkboard and, figuring out equations and splitting the atom. And you just don't get to see it in person. Then all of a sudden it was, never mind. You're right. He's too old. But forget about that. Here's Kamala Harris. And now it's forget about the fact that she was VP for 4 years. Just focus on the future. Just focus on the future. And I'm thinking, so I'm not even supposed to remember like today? I'm supposed to already be forgetting what's happening right now? It's a big ask of people.
Yes, it is. Grace Curley, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciated your time. And happy viewing tonight for the rest of the DNC and the rest of this week. Grace Curley, The Grace Curley Show. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys. I'm honored. Thanks for having me.
All right, we have a lot more coming your way. Michael Knowles is about to be joining us in studio. We've still yet to hear from First Lady Jill Biden and President Joe Biden. But first, the left is on the march, pushing their radical agenda, and we need to push back harder. That is one reason we're actually doing this Election Wire show in the first place. We know that they thrive on misinformation. We are here to set the record straight with facts and logic. I've been begging Jeremy Boring, our CEO, to let me roll out a new deal for all of our future members, and he answered my prayer. Right now, you can get 35% off new annual memberships with the code FIGHT, F-I-G-H-T, at dailywire.com/subscribe. Our voices speak for millions who are tired of the left's stranglehold on the narrative. Every single Daily Wire Plus membership helps fund that fight to take back America. The time to act is now. Again, go to dailywire.com/subscribe, use code FIGHT, and join us as we fight the left and build the future. Now, Michael Knowles will be joining us in just a few short minutes. We've got a lot more coming your way.
Well, and one of the things we've got coming is some of the coverage that you've done already, Cabot. You went to Minnesota to speak to residents and business owners who know firsthand how Governor Tim Walz has led that state. So how was that experience?
It was fascinating. There's been many times where I've gone out and filmed for the Daily Wire, and I've had security with me just to make sure nothing goes crazy. Oftentimes I think, did we really need security? I felt pretty safe here in Nashville, other places. Being on the ground in Minneapolis was one of the first times where I called my wife and I said, thank you so much to Daily Wire for giving me security. I felt very unsafe.
Really?
I spoke to dozens and dozens of Minneapolis locals who said this city has not been the same since the George Floyd riots, since Governor Tim Walz took over. And the overwhelming sense was that he did not do enough to make the city safe during those riots and that the city has never recovered. I spoke to a business owner, Greg Urban, who ran a saloon there in Minneapolis that closed down when Governor Tim Walz took over during his disastrous COVID lockdowns. Have a listen to that conversation and hear what he, a Minneapolis local, had to say about Governor Tim Walz.
315 First Avenue North used to be the site of Wild Greg's Saloon, a popular bar in downtown Minneapolis. But as owner Greg Urban explains, when Governor Tim Walz shut it down during COVID, the bar never recovered.
The bar and restaurant business is very tough to start with. Now you add on, 25% capacity, 50% capacity, mask mandates. It's pretty tough to drink a beer through a mask. I don't know if you've ever tried. It's pretty tough. We opened in March of 2019, and of course, a year later, Governor Walz ordered all the bars, restaurants, and many small businesses in the city to close until, middle of 2021. Figure it out, I guess, was the message. Anytime during, the whole COVID period, you'd drive by a Walmart, a Home Depot, any place like that, the parking lot would be full. But all the small businesses were forced closed. So, what does that tell you? They had record years. We took in zero, but still had to pay rent, still had to pay utilities, still had to pay property taxes. No relief there. And it's like, are you supposed to pay with monopoly money?
Yeah.
The reality is Wisconsin was fully open just 30 miles away, and that's where people went. You couldn't find a parking spot in downtown Hudson. It was all Minnesota license plates. Tim Walz set up a snitch line to where if you saw a COVID violation, you could call in and he would dispatch his COVID police that he had set up.
At the tone, please leave the following information: your name, your callback number, how the stay-at-home order is being violated, and where the stay-at-home order was violated.
They went as far as banning holiday gatherings, Christmas, Thanksgiving, things like that. So if you see your neighbor having their mom and dad over for Thanksgiving, you can pick up the phone and call the COVID snitch line. And there's instances where Tim Walz put people in jail for as much as 90 days for violating one of his orders. I mean, he wasn't messing around with this. He wanted this state locked down so tight, and he would use his jails to do that.
You have a business in Austin, Texas.
Yes. We finally, later in 2021, decided it was time to leave.
Talk to us about the difference from a governmental perspective and how the state of Texas handled COVID versus what we saw here in Minnesota.
The difference is in Texas, you had their Attorney General, Ken Paxton. You had their Governor, Greg Abbott, using state powers. Ken Paxton was blocking some of the COVID regulations that the city of Austin was putting in place to make sure things reopen and that the city could get back on track. When it came to crime, Governor Abbott was deploying the state police in Austin, protecting my business.
That was not the case here in Minneapolis.
You'd walk out here, there was nothing. There was nobody. Big cities have crime, even the best ones. But you also have the perception of crime and the perception of safety. And when you walk out and you see police, there is a perception of safety. And in a large entertainment district, which this once was here in Minneapolis, you need that perception. There's nothing happening down here. You know, most of the businesses are closed, so there's not a lot of places to go. There's not that sense of vibrancy that there once was. I mean, it was a lot of fun to come down here not very long ago. Right around the corner here is the 1st Precinct, and there were major protests. They had big concrete bunkers. I mean, it kind of looked like a war zone down here.
So they were sort of laying siege to the police precinct here.
Very much so.
We are about half a block from your business. You'd think that it would be a very safe place, and there'd be police all around.
It's the craziest thing. You know, I remember a number of years ago, I saw something on the news how in Chicago, the police were afraid of the criminals and not the other way around. And I'm like, what is this? Like, I couldn't even, fathom that thought. And then I actually saw that kind of happen down here. Yeah. I don't see that changing, and that's a troubling thought, right? I mean, we really hope that we get some leadership at some point that I can come down here, even if I'm not a business owner down here, and have dinner, see a Twins game, and go out after that, right? And that's the hope. But we need leadership. We need leadership for that to happen. And Tim Walz hasn't given us that, and he won't give the country leadership.
You have known Tim Walz and his leadership for years now.
Yeah.
What do you want the country to know about Governor Walz?
Well, I heard the comment the other day that Tim Walz is Gavin Newsom with less hair and wearing flannel. Now, the reality is I think Tim Walz is further left than Gavin Newsom. He's been an absolute disaster, obviously, for my closed business here. And I think he would be an absolute disaster as vice president of the country.
All right. There you have it, hearing directly from a Minneapolis business owner who I did not know going in what his opinions of Governor Walz would be. He obviously had very strong ones. His business was shut down because of his policies. And we're joined now by a man who's going to be with us throughout the evening. You already know him. You love him. We know him. We tolerate him. Michael J. Knowles.
Wonderful to be with all of you. Thank you for having me for Joe Biden's speech that was supposed to start half an hour ago. That's so great.
So we'll get to Joe Biden's speech and what you're expecting and hoping to hear tonight. But first, let's talk about Tim Walz. You know, we see this documentary, this mini documentary that's going to be airing on Daily Wire soon. And I was struck over and over by the number of people who the first thing they said when they thought of Tim Walz was the George Floyd riots, which for a lot of people at this point might be sort of an afterthought. It was a couple years ago. It stuck with the people in that state who said Tim Walz did not call out the National Guard in time. He did nothing to now make the city safe again. and they said it was a line of demarcation. The state has never been the same since then. What do you think of Tim Walz as a pick more broadly for Harris?
Well, usually burning down multiple cities sticks with the residents of those cities. So I'm not surprised. I'm also not surprised that business owners are a little miffed at Tim Walz. Breaking news, stop the presses. A communist doesn't support business.
Well, one person's communism is another person's neighborliness.
Neighborliness,
Yes.
that's right. And what did he say? When he was a teacher in the 90s, this was reported, he said that communism is just when everybody shares. so no surprise there. Right.
He also said it was, when you do group projects, right?
Yes,
right.
yeah.
One kid does all the work and then everyone else gets a free ride.
Well, he's visited China, like 30 times or something? So maybe something was just lost in translation from the CCP. But in any case, he is the furthest left candidate, or running mate that Kamala could have chosen. And Kamala is the furthest left candidate that we possibly could have had. And so there's this special irony that they're struggling to maintain the hold on the working class. They're struggling to win over the labor vote. The entire theme of the DNC has been labor and the working class, but these poor guys couldn't even get the head of the Teamsters because the head of the Teamsters became the first labor union boss ever to speak at the RNC. The working class is with the Republicans for the first time in my lifetime, I guess maybe the first time ever. So they're all trying to hit this. They got this poor understudy union boss who really flopped at the DNC. AOC really tried to hit this, pulling up her bona fides as a waitress and a bartender. And again, I don't know that really went over all that well. Because people who want to work, people who want to have jobs, especially people who want to have a small business, we're not talking about the billionaire class, to quote Bernie Sanders, we're talking about people who have small and medium-sized businesses. They realize that the policies of Biden and Harris have been absolutely disastrous, and the ones who are in Minnesota know that Walz was absolutely deadly for business. And I mean that literally. He allowed marauders to run roughshod over the city, and then the ones who were arrested were bailed out of jail thanks to the donations raised by Kamala Harris. So I see why the Democrats are pushing so hard to hold on to labor. I just don't really see it working.
Well, so let me ask you, Michael, as we're watching this, there's a lot of stars here tonight. I'm a little surprised that their lineup has been so high-profile heavy. Do you feel like they're doing this to try to cover for the fact that they are not talking policy?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I've missed out on some of the stars. Maybe it's because I was driving over. Thus far, I saw Mark Hamill, and I thought, wow, the best the Democrats can get.
Political stars.
Oh, political stars. Okay. Because I mean it sincerely. I was waiting for some big Hollywood heavy hitters, and we didn't get it. You know, the fact that the Democrats, from the Biden White House all the way to the Harris campaign, have to keep trotting out this man, Mark Hamill, whose only notable film role originated in the 1970s is kind of weird. I mean,
weird.
It's
You're not allowed to say that. Only Democrats can.
You're right. That's the word of the campaign.
To be fair, I mean, he does charge $400 plus for a headshot.
At least.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a little bit odd. Maybe that shows that Hollywood, the Democrat establishment, doesn't feel all that confident about Kamala Harris's chances. So in terms of the Democrat stars, I thought AOC did a pretty good job. She's very, very good at being a member of Congress, which involves bloviating and shrieking and just repeating the same things over and over. Yeah, but she's pretty good at it. I don't know. It just feels a little weak to me. You know, Democrats have spent most of my lifetime trying to lean into identity politics, moving away from the old school leftism, which stressed economic factors, moving into race and sex, now gender identity. But now I think they're realizing that that's not really paying off in a way it once did. So they're trying to pivot back to the economic issues, and it's a very confused message.
But don't you think, Michael, when you see Hillary, I mean, she is the celebrity. I mean, she got a standing ovation that was longer than the one that to the people who are there and are part of the cult. This is the high priestess. This is the leader. And they just clapped and clapped for her.
Well, it's very fitting that you open with Luke Skywalker and you close with Darth Vader. So, of course, you would be there. And Hillary, frankly, is looking better than just about anyone there. It pains me to say it.
We all said it.
I mean, she's been around for a long time. She was around St. Petersburg when they felt it was time for a change. But she's looking positively rejuvenated. And I wonder if this is in part because she knows this is an absolute mess. This whole campaign has been a mess. Even before Biden dropped out, it's only gotten crazier. And she's showing up because there are no stakes for her. She wants to get Chelsea an ambassadorship, according to reports. They think they're going to put the young Clinton into the court of St. James, which seems silly even if Kamala did win. But otherwise, I think Hillary's just looking on from the sidelines. Okay, you folks didn't want to elect me. Good luck. Go on with the clown show.
It is interesting. I was in the room at the 2016 Democratic National Convention when Hillary accepted the nomination. The applause that she got tonight was longer and louder than what I saw in the room in 2016 when I was there. Why is that? Wouldn't you think this is the woman that gave us Donald Trump, essentially, by her failed campaign? Why isn't the Democratic Party viewing her with scorn?
Because in 2016, Democrats, I think, were legitimately upset that this was the best they could do. This is the best, one of the most hated women in America. We can't do, what about Bernie? They rigged the campaign against Bernie. What about, I don't know, any fresh blood? They couldn't find any. But there's that old line about conservative optimists and conservative pessimists. The conservative pessimist says things can't get any worse. The conservative optimist says, oh, yes, they can. I think what they've realized is things really can get worse. Biden really is a worse candidate, at least this time. They rigged it in 2020 by changing all the rules with COVID. So he did squeak through in a bizarre election. But had Biden been running in 2016 with his failures of competence, I don't think he would have probably done worse than Hillary. And Kamala is awful, and I don't mean that just in a partisan way. I don't like her personally. I don't like what she stands for. But she's also just a really bad candidate. She's a good careerist. She manages to put herself in good positions that help her. But in terms of winning votes, she's not really great. She was barely electable in California. And then, obviously, when she ran in 2020, she didn't receive a single primary vote while she was running for president. So, with hindsight, I think the Democrats are looking and saying, those halcyon days of Hillary Clinton, where have they gone?
Don't you feel like, though, it doesn't even matter that Kamala is a bad candidate from their perspective? This is the anti-Trump campaign. That it doesn't matter who it is that you're seeing. It's not Joe Biden, who's, almost dead. We put in somebody who's, very much alive, and they're not Trump. Because all we heard from every single speech was how bad Trump was at this. And they kept talking about her vision or her leadership or her policies, but then had absolutely no specifics because there are none. So it seems to me that all they're leaning into is, hey, you don't like Trump? This person's not Trump. There you go.
I don't think that's fair. There are a couple of specifics to the Kamala Harris campaign. For instance, she's not going to have any taxes on tips if she's elected.
That is brilliant.
She's going to implement a $6,000 child tax credit. So she does have at least two good ideas. They just happen to be ideas that she stole from the Trump campaign. And so I agree. It's the Democrats are just running against Trump. And that will do just fine for 40% of the electorate, or who knows, maybe 45% of the electorate. But 45% of the electorate is not going to get them there. And so a lot of skittish Republicans were running scared for the past few weeks during the Kamala honeymoon when her numbers kept ticking up according to most polls. Now you're starting to see some polls show movement in the other direction. Maybe she'll get a boost out of the convention. I think this might be in part why the Trump campaign has held off spending too much money. Yeah. I think they're just taking the blow, right? They're saying she's going to have this honeymoon. We're going to let that ride until we get to bypass the establishment media at the one debate that she's agreed to give. And so, sure, she can have her jump in the polls, but it's going to be illusory because she isn't running on anything other than my ideas, which proves that I'm not as scary as she's saying that I am.
Okay, so Michael, Kamala has taken one really stark position, and that is her headquarters said that you are a Trump operative.
A top
Trump operative. Do you want to respond to that? And what are your plans as a top Trump operative?
I'm not just top Trump operative Michael Knowles. I am top Trump operative Michael Knowles with Project 2025, which is confusing.
By the way.
Thank you. It's confusing because President Trump has disavowed Project 2025. And I, just to clear up for the record, I am not a top Trump operative, though I support him. I am not in any way affiliated with Project 2025, though I think it's great. I'm a big fan of it. And they attacked me for two reasons. Once, this was about 2 weeks ago, I said that divorce is bad and we should have less of it. So you could see why that would irk Democrats who just want to absolutely destroy the family and then offer all sorts of free castrations and abortions and things at the DNC. But then most recently they attacked me for, what did they even attack me for? They said, I said that men and women are different and that our law should reflect that men and women are not exactly the same. So women should, again, call me a fuddy-duddy and a far-right Project 2025 top Trump operative extremist weirdo. I think girls should have their own bathrooms, for instance, maybe their own changing rooms at the public pool. Maybe they shouldn't be drafted into combat. We shouldn't throw them at the front line to be beheaded by jihadis or whatever. Those were just my suggestions. And the Kamala campaign is furious, so I want to clear it up. I am not a Trump operative. I'm just a normal guy, and so is Trump, so I think he probably agrees with me.
I'm disappointed that those are the only two things they could come up with to hit you on. If the Kamala headquarters needs any more advice, I'm happy to give
this man a call.
I have a lot more dirt on Michael Knowles. Now, Michael, as a Trump operative,
top.
Let's say if you were a Trump operative, I'll believe you that you're not. If you were, what sort of advice would you give to Trump with regard to the conversation around Kamala being a DEI hire? They asked Trump this at the National Association of Black Journalists. He was kind of on the fence about how he wanted to approach it. And when you take into account that the reason she's vice president is because she is a black woman, that is fact. Joe Biden said, I'm going to pick a woman of color to be my vice president. So she got the job because of that. And now she was selected as the president. It seems like a reasonable thing to point out that she got this position because of her skin color and the fact that she's a woman. How does the Trump campaign approach that in a nuanced way? Do they even need to be nuanced? What would you advise them?
I think Trump is doing a good job, actually, at this. But if you want to have any nuance to it, the simplest way to do it is to point out that he's just using Joe Biden's words. Even specifically with DEI, we have an official White House transcript of Joe Biden saying that diversity, equality, and inclusion is extremely important to his administration, and it starts all the way at the top with Kamala Harris. So even after Biden said, I'm going to hire a black woman, I'm going to exclude 94% of the population from the potential candidates, even after she was vice president, he said she's a DEI hire. So Trump, if he's asked that question, he'd say, look, okay, it's not my words, all right? I'm Joe Biden said it. So you believe Joe? You like Joe Biden? He's your president? I don't know. I'm just quoting his words. Joe Biden says Kamala Harris is a DEI hire. You all say DEI is so great. I think we should hire people based on the merits. If they're good at the job, maybe that's my view. You think you love DEI, so you tell me what's wrong with DEI. Why is it wrong? Was Joe Biden a liar when he said that Kamala's a DEI hire? That's what I would do. Trump is very good at landing attacks like that and put them on the defensive. There's one time, I think this was years ago during the Bush administration, Dick Cheney was asked if he wanted to invade Iran or bomb Iran or something. And he had this wonderful response. He said, why should we attack Iran? He asked the journalist. The journalist was trying to back him into a corner where either one way he looks weak, one way he looks belligerent. He said, why should we attack Iran? And he made the hostile interviewer make his case for him. I think that's what you got to do on this question.
Yeah.
And pretty much all the others.
I'm leaning more on that. I by the way, I am not a top Trump operative either, and they don't listen to anything that I have to say. But I would just avoid the question altogether. I think I would go out and say, it doesn't matter. You lived under my administration and your life was better. It was better on the economy. It was better on the border. We were more safe in the world. You've lived with Harris in that position. What's your life like economically? How do you feel about the border and security in this country? That's it. It doesn't matter. I don't care how she was hired. You've lived under both. Where's your life better?
Well, speaking of the security, speaking of violence in the streets, we're already seeing that right now at the convention with these protests. I mean, is the specter of what's happening there with these protests outside of the DNC, people being arrested, barricades being taken down, Does that remind people? We can look at a little bit of this video and see, is this telling people that this is what you get with a Kamala Harris presidency?
Well, again, I'm from Chicago, so that's kind of what it looks like every day, to be perfectly honest, and everyone's sort of hooked up with it. Unfortunately, there is that disconnect, and that should be hammered home. This is, do you want to be aligned with these people? Do you want to be aligned with people who support terror, or do you want to be against it? It's very simple, and I think you have to really boil it down. There is, unfortunately, no room for intelligence or nuance or anything. You have to hit the key issues over and over again, because if you go to the nuance, I think it ends up being a lost cause.
Yeah, no, we're going to get to a whole lot more. Again, President Joe Biden will be taking the stage shortly. But right now, we're going to hear from a man who was on the VP shortlist, Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. Let's head over to Chicago.
Incest and non-viable pregnancies. That leaves 12-year-old girls like Hadley with no options. That fails any test of humanity, any test of basic decency, any test of whether you have any underlying empathy. Thankfully, this extremism is being soundly rejected all over our country. In Kentucky, we put reproductive freedom on the ballot last November, and I beat Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell's hand-picked candidate by more than 5 percentage points. This November, we're going to beat them again. Elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and protect reproductive freedom. Folks, Donald Trump appointed the Supreme Court justices who got us into this mess. His Project 2025 goes even further. Here's the thing. Trump and Vance simply don't believe in your freedom. Trump says people are absolutely thrilled that women have their basic rights eliminated. J.D. Vance says women should stay in violent marriages and that pregnancies resulting from rape are simply inconvenient. Their policies give rapists more rights than their victims. That's not inconvenient, it's just plain wrong. And a woman grieving a non-viable pregnancy shouldn't be required to carry it to term just to listen to her child die or to hear no sound at all. All women should have the freedom to make their own decisions. Freedom over their own bodies. Freedom about whether to pursue IVF. Freedom about whether to have children at all. How we treat people transcends party lines. It goes right to the heart of who we are. My faith teaches me the golden rule that I am to love my neighbor as myself. And the parable of the Good Samaritan says we are all each other's neighbors. So I want anyone watching tonight, Republican, Independent, Democrat, to know that you are welcome here. We believe in America where we live out our values, end anger politics once and for all, and move beyond this us versus them by remembering we are all Americans. That's how Joe Biden and Kamala Harris lead. They both called to ask how they could help Kentucky in recovering from natural disasters. They helped us improve our roads, our bridges, and invested in our people. They didn't ask me who Kentuckians voted for. They asked me what Kentuckians needed, and folks, they delivered. Kamala Harris gets it. She knows we must move beyond anger, extremism, and division, that everyone has dignity and deserves respect. America, we're going to win. And we're going to win by staying true to our values of compassion, empathy, and doing right by our neighbors. I'm so proud to be all in for the next president of the United States, Kamala Harris. Thank you.
All right, there you have Andy Beshear, the man who very badly wanted to be vice president, was not selected. And we were talking off air. There was an interesting moment there to get to J.D. Vance, the man who is the vice presidential nominee, when Andy Beshear said that one reason J.D. Vance is a terrible pick is because he is cosplaying as a man from Appalachia and that he's not really a hillbilly and he's not really from around here, which I will just say is rich, given the fact that Andy Beshear grew up in the governor's mansion in Kentucky. His dad was the governor, so I don't know if he wants to be putting his credentials as a true hillbilly to the test. What do you make of Beshear and again, what we're seeing here?
Beshear was totally unimpressive, which is why one of the reasons he didn't get picked. He also didn't really add anything to the ticket.
As opposed to the very impressive Tim Walz.
Walsh, he's eccentric and a communist, and he's got this weird thing where he was really into peddling radical sex stuff on kids for like over 25 years. So he's got all sorts of vulnerabilities.
Bells and whistles.
Yes. Yeah. However, on the stump, I actually find him pretty good. He's energetic. He's a little eccentric, which is refreshing sometimes. Andy Beshear is just a cardboard cutout of a boring politician. So that speech was a complete waste of time. It's funny when they try to attack Vance in that way, though. Walz actually had a similar kind of attack. He said, my friends from the hills, they didn't go to Yale Law School. They never ended up in private equity. And I thought, that would be a good attack if J.D. Vance had started out that way. It'd be a good attack if he had started out like Andy Beshear. But he didn't. He came from nothing. His mother was a drug addict. He had a grandma who believed in him. He came from really awful circumstances, worked his way up, was able to make it to the top law school, and then private equity, he made some money, and now he ran for Senate. That is the American dream. When we talk about the middle America, the forgotten man, the working class, the hillbilly elegy, the topic of J.D.'s memoir, everyone recognizes that people really have been left behind, and there have been bad policies that have left a lot of America behind. We don't want people to stay that way. The goal is actually to rebuild families, to rebuild the economy specifically for these people. So, if anything, when they highlight JD's success, to me, that only bolsters his candidacy.
I mean, this is a story that was so great that they made it into a movie, right? Like the fact that they're coming back on the other side of that and trying to make it into something that's not. This is the inspirational American dream. Ron Howard thought so, and now you're trying to make it into a bad thing.
Is that why they've had so much trouble trying to find something to really disparage J.D. Vance, so that they're finding really normal pictures from his high school yearbook where he's clowning around with girls in the boys' bathroom, which, by the way, that used to be a funny thing when you had girls in the boys' bathroom. But, that's the best thing they can come up with. Or when he's at Yale dressed like a woman
Puts
because
a wig on
it was supposed to be funny back then for men to dress in drag. I mean, are they just grasping at straws, anything they can come up with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact is that he has this incredible story that's been beloved by so many. He's kind of really normal, and so they don't have anything. So now they're just kind of going around the periphery and saying, no, this actually wasn't a great story. He's a private equity guy. He went to Yale and trying to turn it in. I mean, their whole brand is gaslighting, right? Everything they tell us isn't true, so they're just throwing the same thing.
And it is interesting, too, if J.D. Vance had not climbed out of the gutter and were not as successful as he was, if he were still a poor, white, working-class, drug-addicted man living in Ohio or Kentucky, the left would hate him still. They would say, you are a deplorable.
They would sneer at him.
They would sneer at him. They would look down at him. So it's damned if you do, if you don't. They would hate him regardless. And I think that tells you about him. But about the left. Michael, I am interested in your take, though, on the electoral side of this equation here. We've now had about a month where J.D. Vance has been the nominee. Do you think it's been a net positive, or do you think anyone they picked, the left would have killed them?
And before you get to that, Michael, I just want to know, we are still waiting on Joe and Jill Biden, and we've got Raphael Warnock. So we're just really stretching this evening out as we are way behind schedule.
You guys are going to have to deal with a lot more Michael Knowles tonight, unfortunately.
I'm going to have to deal with a lot more.
Yeah. But what do you think of the pick now that we've had about a month to go on it?
They would have gone after anyone. JD is younger. He's fresher to the Senate than someone like Rubio. So perhaps they would have had a harder time knocking down Rubio's numbers, though they would have succeeded to some degree. Glenn Youngkin is relatively a newcomer, so they probably would have knocked his numbers down pretty good. Who were the other contenders?
Doug Burgum.
Burgum. They would have certainly knocked him down. No one knew anything about him. Yeah, Tim Scott. He's been around for a while, but still, they would have. At the very least, they would have used this generic attack of weird that they're using against all the Republicans. So,
what about like a Sarah Sanders or an Elise Stefanik? Because one of the things that the left is leaning into so heavily is this, she's going to be the mom of the country. She's going to nurture us. We need this, woman. Do you think that might have had, sort of a different effect on the?
No, look, Democrats might lean into that. I don't think Republicans want the longhouse, as the terminally online call it. And also,
I want to define the longhouse.
The longhouse is this sort of notion that in some idyllic past age, these primitive societies were ruled by a council of women. There were matriarchies or something, and I don't think that works with Trump. Trump's a tough guy. He goes bathing in a blue Brioni suit with a power tie. I don't think any of that would have worked. Had it been, look, Sarah Sanders is great. I don't really know Elise Stefanik. She's obviously a very potent political player. They would have portrayed them as the devil and ginned up all sorts of fake scandals about them too. So, any Republican, the fact that the best they can get on JD is that he's weird shows they really have nothing on him. So what does that mean? There are all these headlines. People are regretting the JD pick. I think that's all baloney. The JD pick, by the way, was not even about balancing out a ticket or boosting numbers. Everyone knows you're going to vote for Trump or against Trump. That's it. Yeah. There's no. I don't think the VP pick matters for electability. The VP pick mattered for what comes next. And so, had Trump gone with a guy who's closer to his own age, like Doug Burgum, Trump would be saying, "I want a guy to just balance me out," and then that's the end of the movement. The fact that Trump picked a young man who is ideologically most closely aligned with his views shows that Trump is trying to leave a legacy here. And he's thinking of this election not just in terms of 24, but in terms of 2028 and 2032. I think that is exciting for Republican voters. If the knock on this campaign back when Biden was still in the race is, we got these two old guys, no one's thinking about the future, Trump signaled that this really is about the future. And so I continue to believe it was a good pick. I don't think any of the others would have done better. The media would have treated them all basically exactly the same. And so now we're just waiting to see, does the honeymoon end for Kamala?
Do we ever go back to the George W. Bush style Republican Party after this?
It's possible. It's possible. Politics swings back and forth. There was a very silly piece in the New York Times by a former conservative, or somewhat conservative Republican, David French. Shocking. And then he, I think you're familiar with
I'm a little familiar.
David's work, bestseller. But, David became a never Trumper and left National Review and was at a couple places. Now he writes for the New York Times. And he said, one of the big awful things about Trumpism is that Trump has pulled the party away from Reaganism. But that isn't true. Trump is the closest to Reagan in my lifetime. He took Reagan's campaign slogan.
The same slogan,
his foreign policy is closer to Reagan's than any Republican since him. Even his view on, say, tariffs or something, which is, people forget these days, but the Republican Party was founded on tariffs. Abraham Lincoln said, give me a tariff, I'll give you the greatest country in the world. So if anything, Trump is a return to Reagan. Now, Trump is pulling away from Bushism. So that I think is what some of the more neoconservative type of Republicans don't like. But that certainly could come back. If Trump really flops in this cycle, if the Trump-backed candidates really flop, if after one more cycle, two more cycles, 3 or 4 more cycles, the Trump candidates can't win, then the party is going to adapt, and you might see a return to the Chamber of Commerce and bombing the Middle East.
I do want to get to you bring up David French. I want to get to the evangelical conversation with Megan. Just one more follow-up on that. If Trump flops and Trump candidates flop. In the 2022 midterms, Trump candidates did flop. We saw a number of Trump-aligned senators and gubernatorial candidates who did fail. Do you think that the Trump type of populist conservative, the Trump-aligned candidates, only succeed when Trump is on the ticket, or only succeed when they're, so closely aligned with Trump. Do you think they aren't as successful when it's not Trump?
There's nothing like the real thing. Even we were talking earlier about Marco Rubio, who, has done a very good job in the Senate.
I worked on his presidential race in 2016, so
you remember.
If you're gonna critique the race and the job he did trying to become president,
I want to critique whatever part you were responsible for in the campaign. There was a moment when Rubio was really trying to stick it out in Florida, and he tried to do Trump. He tried to do a Don Rickles routine and talked about Trump's hands, and it doesn't work. Trump is an American original. There is nobody like him. That has been true since the 80s, at least, okay? So, sure, and off years are also really tough. So what the Democrats and the anti-Trump Republicans have tried to do is blame every Republican loss, dog catcher in, 2019 in Palookaville on Trump. But yeah, of course, he is going to bring up the ticket, especially for the candidates who are more aligned with him. The question is what we even mean by populism. If we mean, don't bomb every single country in the world.
That's a great point.
Care a little bit about manufacturing, and then
borders,
it seems kind of normal to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so right now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Kassy Akiva, who is standing by in Chicago with the last lone protester out on the streets.
Yes, right behind me is the last pro-Palestine protester outside the DNC. He was likely part of the march on the DNC protest today, where people were, claiming they were going to shut down the DNC. In reality, it was about 5,000 protesters. They started to trickle out towards the later hours. Some of them tore down a barricade. And then I would say as many police officers as protesters showed up and kind of scared them off. So we have one guy left. He's standing right behind me, and he's hanging tight. We'll see how long he stays. But there are protests scheduled for tomorrow. There's a big one scheduled for 7 p.m. So we'll see what happens, but we'll be here on the ground, me and Spencer.
Kassy, I want to ask you about the message you were hearing from them. Obviously, it's, we hate Israel, we hate Jews, they're genocidal maniacs. We know that. What were they saying specifically about Kamala Harris and Joe Biden?
Well, they're completely anti-Kamala. They're anti-Joe Biden. They're holding signs calling her Killer Kamala and Genocide Joe, and they're completely against them, and they're really, really just, causing problems here. We actually saw delegates waiting in line to get through security to go inside, and people wearing keffiyehs covering their face were coming up and harassing them and screaming at them. So it's a little tense over here, and I don't see it getting any better throughout the week.
Kassy, from what I heard of the protests, there were 3 distinct types of protests, but all together. There were the Palestine flags and the Free Palestine chants. Then there were the ladies dressed up like abortion pills. And then there were the homosexuals with the rainbow flag. And it would seem to me that I'm no expert necessarily, they don't necessarily gel together. So were there any tensions among the protesters, or are they putting aside all manner of logic and coherence to attack the DNC?
No, Michael, it was a big kumbaya event. You're forgetting several. Tito was here. A bunch of communists were here. We actually have started a collection of communist reading material. So I have a few newspapers in my backpack. I think I'll give them a read later. So it was a big kumbaya event of intersectionality, and they're all just, hanging out together, having some drums. I would say the one thing that has surprised me is that usually, I've been covering protests a long time, but usually they don't clean up after themselves. They leave like a war zone of trash everywhere, but they have people who are designated for cleaning up trash. So I'll give them, 5 stars just for that.
They have a very good PR team here. One thing that's interesting, we were on the ground at the RNC. There were scattered protests, but they were protests coming from the left. This does kind of go against the left's message of unity, that these are intra-party conflicts that we're seeing play out here. In your experience, you've been covering these protests around the country. In your experience, how indicative is this of where the Democratic base is? Is this half of 1% that feels this way? Is this 10%, 20%? What's your sense?
I mean, while there are crazy people outside with these awful signs, and we even met one guy who says he openly supports Hamas and had a sign saying so. When you go inside the DNC, there are also keffiyehs. They're wearing them like lanyards. I mean, it's just completely out there and open. So I would say that these protesters are harsher on the Democrats because they think they can actually make change there. The Republicans are going to ignore them, but the Democrats are more sympathetic. So you're seeing the crazies outside, but they're also inside.
Kassy, it's Carol Roth. Do you get the sense that any of these people are going to vote? And if so, is it going to be a protest vote, no pun intended, or what is it that you think that these people are going to do?
I think they'll probably write in. I mean, with the signs being so anti-Kamala and anti-Joe and anti-Tim Walz and all of these, I don't think they're going to vote for the Democratic Party. They'll probably write something in. Maybe they'll write in Sinwar or a different terrorist.
All right, we will leave it there. Kassy, please stay safe. We're going to be hearing from you throughout the week, getting the latest coverage of the protests going on outside and also the conflict going on inside. That's Kassy Akiva, Daily Wire reporter. Thanks so much, Kassy.
Thanks so much.
All right, I want to turn now to the topic of the evangelical vote. We have here a subject matter expert, Megan Basham, who now has, again, a New York Times bestselling book, Shepherds for Sale.
I actually brought it with me.
She has a copy here. So, Megan, talk to us about the evangelical vote, what you're seeing, and also the efforts. We've seen this Evangelicals for Biden movement. Is that gaining any steam? What's going on there?
Okay, so what you need to understand, first of all, is that evangelicals have rightly been called America's most powerful voting bloc. And that's left-wing media outlets like The Atlantic who are calling them that. So they roughly represent some 30% of the electorate. They're really important. They're most important to the GOP base. So you don't win elections if you are a Republican candidate without really turning them out. And that's why it's become so important to so many of these left-wing foundations, well-known left-wing billionaires, people like George Soros, people like Bill Gates, people like eBay founder Pierre Omidyar, to try to funnel money into evangelical front groups and ministries to try to peel off a little bit of that vote and try to get it to back particular left-wing agenda items like open borders or like climate change policies. So we're seeing a lot of that. And as to the question of does it matter? Yeah, it does matter. So, I jotted down just a few of what past elections have seen when it comes to that evangelical. You look at Obama, in 2008, he got 26% of the evangelical vote, and he won. In 2012, he got 22%, and he won. Hillary Clinton got 16%, and she lost. Biden got 24% in 2020, and he won. So if Kamala Harris can get over 20% of that evangelical vote, there's a good chance she wins. So that's why it's so important to them to try to target those voters. And so what you are seeing is that, no, they're not ever going to win a majority any more than Republicans are going to win a majority of the black vote. That's not going to happen. But if they can suppress a key number of them and get others to maybe just a small amount in some of those key swing states to come over to the Kamala Harris campaign, in that case, yeah, that could swing the election.
And your book talks about some of those efforts. What does it look like? How is the left trying to infiltrate the evangelical base? And more specifically, who are they using to do that?
Right. So Michael brought up David French, and he's a good example of someone who's involved in some of these efforts. There is an organization called the After Party. They have created a political Bible study that it doesn't tell you how to vote. It says it's nonpartisan. But if you watch this curriculum, it's actually very subtle. What it does is it says politics are very complex, and you won't always know how you should vote on issues like abortion. And if somebody tells you how you should vote when it comes to abortion, and David French actually says this in this curriculum, you should run from that person. But they devote an entire episode to encouraging Christians to use their vote to take a stand against alleged systemic racism. So that makes it fairly clear, even though they're nonpartisan, who they're telling you to vote for. Now, this curriculum is rolling into conservative churches, conservative evangelical churches, pastoral conferences. It's rolling out to conservative Christian campuses, the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, which represents some 185 member schools, including trusted conservative brands like Azusa Pacific, Biola, Baylor. starting way back in August, they started encouraging all of these schools to bring this after-party curriculum onto their campuses. Here's a key thing you need to know about the after-party curriculum. It's funded exclusively by secular left donors, Rockefeller Philanthropy Advisors, and the Hewlett Foundation. So we're talking about foundations that also back things like, quote-unquote, gender-affirming care for youth, so cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers. They are also funding things like Planned Parenthood. Hewlett is the second largest funder of Planned Parenthood in the country. So that's who's backing this Bible study that's going into these conservative churches.
I wonder, are there any swing states that are more at risk, kind of given this particular base?
Well, I know they, in particular, this after-party curriculum, they said, we want to see this rolling out that Rockefeller did in the battleground state of Ohio. So they seem to really be targeting that. Wisconsin has been very important as well for that evangelical voting base. And when you look at some of the other figures behind it, if you want to broaden out a little bit, Jerusha Duford, who is Billy Graham's granddaughter, has been a key voice in that. She has come out and said, I am backing Kamala Harris. If you look at, speaking of Billy Graham, his magazine, flagship magazine of evangelicalism, Christianity Today, one of the key voices of this Evangelicals for Harris is a guy named Claude Alexander, who is the board chair of Christianity Today. So these are very trusted brands. And, you know, like I said, they don't have to sway a lot, but if they can sway enough, then that achieves what some of these secular left funders have set out to do.
Is it working? Do we know yet? Do we have polling data that's shown that there's been an impact? And again, we're going to get to Dr. Jill Biden. I have to make sure I include the doctor there once she takes the stage. But are these efforts working? Do we see tangible difference?
Okay, so Evangelicals for Biden really just launched. I mean, it had its first Zoom call that it was highly publicized. They're talking about lining up their speakers. So it's a little early to tell how well it will do for Kamala, but we know that it helped Joe Biden in 2020. We know that it was very effective for Obama. We know that Hillary Clinton didn't really care about it. She didn't do the outreach, and she failed. So yeah, I think it can be effective. Whether it be effective for Kamala Harris, we know that they are now trying to repackage her as a Christian. If you look, this Evangelicals for Harris has done a boost of her as somebody who is takes her Christian faith very seriously. They're now trying to repackage Tim Walz in that way, too. You're suddenly hearing him described as a Minnesota Lutheran.
Well, Jesus was a communist, too.
Right.
I've heard.
And a refugee.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's so odd with Kamala because I was discussing with a friend the other day. I said, do we even know how she was raised? And I thought, well, yeah, she was raised in a Marxist household. Her dad was a very prominent Marxist economist, so probably functionally atheist. And then her mother's Indian, but she's married to a Jew, kind of more liberal Jew. So she does.
Michael, I'm so sorry. I'm going to cut you off there. Jill Biden, the First Lady of the United States.
Dr. Jill
Taking
Biden.
the stage here, Dr. Jill Biden. I'm sorry to cut you off again, Michael. We will get to you right now to Dr. Jill Biden.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Love you too. Joe and I have been together for almost 50 years. And still, there are moments when I fall in love with him all over again. Like when I handed him our baby Ashley for the first time and saw the smile that lit up his face. Or on nights after an exhausting day working in the Senate, when he would read one more bedtime story just because the kids asked. When he stops on a rope line because he sees someone grieving who needs to know that everything is going to be all right one day. Or to encourage that child with a stutter to find the confidence she needs. Those moments when I'm reminded of all he's accomplished in the name of something bigger than himself. Receiving the Medal of Freedom with humility. Placing his hand on our family Bible to take his oath of office. And weeks ago, when I saw him dig deep into his soul and decide to no longer seek re-election and endorse Kamala Harris. With faith and conviction, Joe knows that our nation's strength doesn't come from intimidation or cruelty. It comes from the small acts of kindness that heal deep wounds, from service to the communities that make us who we are, from love of a country that shines with promise and renewal. Kamala Harris knows that too. Our son, Beau, first worked with Kamala when he was Attorney General of Delaware. He told me at the dinner table one night, "Mom, she's special, someone to keep your eye on." And he was right. Joe and I know Kamala. We have seen her courage, her determination, and her leadership up close. Kamala and Tim, you will win. And you are inspiring a new generation. We are all a part of something bigger than ourselves, and we are stronger than we know. The future of our country is in the hands of those in this room and all of you watching at home. It's going to take all of us, and we can't afford to lose. With faith in each other, hope for a brighter future, and love for our country, we will fight and we will win together. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so that was the lady of the night. Well, maybe I should rephrase that. That was POTUS, Mrs. POTUS, Jill Biden.
POTUS.
Yes,
POTUS.
Yes. So it was a good speech. It was a short speech. We all commented on how she looked bright and sparkly and pretty. Thoughts?
The only phrase I didn't get, she said, we are stronger than we know. That is an incoherent if you're making a declaration, then you're actually making a statement of knowledge. Yeah. So that was my big problem with it. The rest I kind of tuned out.
I just can't get over how angry she must be, having all of this ripped from her right when she got the Vogue cover. She must be seething.
All right, next up, Ashley Biden, the daughter of Joe Biden, and that will be President Biden himself.
I remember pulling up to the Wilmington Amtrak station, riding up the escalator to the platform. The train stops, doors open, and Dad steps out. As soon as I saw him, I run down that platform and jump into his arms. Like magic, Mom brought out a cake, they sang happy birthday, and I blew out the candles. Dad hugged me, and he said that he had to get back to work. He crossed to the southbound train, and off he went to D.C. That was a snapshot of one moment, of one day, on this extraordinary journey of being Joe Biden's daughter. Joe Biden is the OG girl dad. He told me I could be anything and I could do anything. As a child, I would sit on the leather chair in his office doing my homework, and he would sit next to me doing his work, drafting the Violence Against Women Act. And he wasn't just a girl dad. I could see that he valued and trusted women. How he listened to his mother, how he believed in his sister, and most of all, how he respected my mother's career. Dad was always there, doing everything he could to be a true partner to her. Dad, you always tell us, but we don't tell you enough, that you are the love of our lives and the life of our love. I had my wedding reception in my parents' backyard. At the time, my dad was vice president. But he was also that dad who literally set up the entire reception. He was riding around in his John Deere four-wheeler, fixing the place settings, arranging the plants, and by the way, he was very emotional. I thought that I would be a mess, but he was the one crying, and I was the one who had to comfort him. Before he walked me down the aisle, he turned to me and said that he would always be my best friend. All these years later, Dad, you are still my best friend. His example in service inspired my career. I'm a social worker in Philadelphia. I support formerly incarcerated women as they heal from past trauma and they reclaim their lives. Dad always told me that I was no better than anybody else and nobody was better than me. He taught me that everyone deserves a fair shot and that we shouldn't leave anyone behind. That's what you learn from a fighter who has been underestimated his entire life. When I look at Dad, I see grace, strength, and humility. I see one of the most consequential leaders ever in history. And I also know that he never stops thinking about you, about your dreams, about your dignity, about your opportunities, about your family. Dad knows that family is everything. When Hunter and I lost our brother Beau to cancer in 2015, the grief and the pain felt like it might never end. Dad had the capacity to step out of his own pain and absorb ours. And I know that Beau is here with us tonight, as he is always with us. After Beau passed, I got this tattoo on my wrist. It says, "Courage, dear heart." A reminder to myself to keep going, to get back up, like my dad has always done. He has taught me that a courageous heart is a miraculous thing. A courageous heart can heal a family. A courageous heart can heal a nation, and maybe even the world. And now, this election requires the courageous hearts of all of us. In 2020, my dad selected Kamala Harris to beat Donald Trump. And he knows in 2024 she will beat Donald Trump again. So tonight, I am asking you, if you stood with us in 2020, call upon your courageous heart. Stand with us today. Work harder than you have ever worked before in your life. This is the fight of our lifetime. Our freedom, our democracy, our reproductive rights. All of this, all of it is on the ballot. And I know together we can do this because my dad helped show us the way. And now I would like to introduce my father, your 46th President of the United States, Joe Biden.
And I'll be at your side forevermore. You know your love keep on lifting higher, higher and higher. I said your love keep on lifting higher and higher. Now once I was downhearted.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I love you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was my daughter. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for so. I tell you what. To my dearest daughter Ashley, God love you, you're incredible. Thank you for that introduction and for being my courageous heart, along with Hunter and our entire family, and especially our rock, Jill. Who, as those of you who know us, she still leaves me both breathless and speechless. Everybody knows her. I love her more than she loves me. She walks down the stairs and I still get that going boom, boom, boom. You all will know me. No, I'm not kidding. Let's give a special round of applause to our First Lady, Jill Biden. My dad used to have an expression, for real. He'd say, Joey, family is the beginning, the middle, and the end. And I love you all. Folks. And America, I love you. Folks, let me ask you. Let me ask you. Are you ready to vote for freedom? Are you ready to vote for democracy and for America? Let me ask you, are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, President and Vice President of the United States? My fellow Democrats, my fellow Americans, nearly 4 years ago, in winter, on the steps of the Capitol, on a cold January day, I raised my right hand and I swore an oath to you and to God to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and to faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States. In front of me was a city surrounded by the National Guard. Behind me, a Capitol just 2 weeks before had been overrun by a violent mob. But I knew then, from the bottom of my heart, that I knew now, there is no place in America for political violence. None. You cannot say you love your country only when you win. In that moment, I wasn't looking to the past. I was looking to the future. I spoke of the work at hand, the moment we had to meet. It was, as I told you then, a winter of peril and possibility. Of peril and possibility. We're in the grip of a once-in-a-century pandemic, historic joblessness, a call for racial justice long overdue, clear and present threats to our very democracy. Thank you. believed then, and I believe now, that progress was and is possible. Justice is achievable. And our best days are not behind us, they're before us. Now it's summer. The winter has passed. And with a grateful heart, I stand before you now on this August night to report that democracy has prevailed. Democracy has delivered. And now democracy must be preserved. You've heard me say it before. We're facing an inflection point. One of those rare moments in history when the decisions we make now will determine the fate of our nation and the world for decades to come. That's not hyperbole, I mean it literally. We're in a battle for the very soul of America. I ran for president in 2020 because of what I saw in Charlottesville in August of 2017. Extremists coming out of the woods, carrying torches, their veins bulging from their necks, carrying Nazi swastikas, and chanting the same exact anti-Semitic bile that was heard in Germany in the early 30s. Neo-Nazis, white supremacists, the Ku Klux Klan, so emboldened by a president then in the White House that they saw as an ally. They didn't even bother to wear their hoods. Hate was on the march in America. Old ghosts and new garments, stirring up the oldest divisions, stoking the oldest fears, giving oxygen to the oldest forces that they long sought to tear apart America. In the process, a young woman was killed. When I contacted her mother, I asked about what happened. She told me. When the president was asked what he thought had happened, Donald Trump said, and I quote, "There are very fine people on both sides. My God." That's what he said. That is what he said and what he meant. That's when I realized, had listened to the admonition of my dead son, I could not stay in the sidelines. So I ran. Because I had no intention of running again. I just lost part of my soul. But I ran with a deep conviction. In America, I know and believe in an America where honesty, dignity, decency still matter. An America where everyone has a fair shot and hate has no safe harbor. An America where the fundamental creed of this nation, that all of us are created equal, is still very much alive. And a broad coalition of Americans joined with me. 81 million voters voted for us. More than any time in all of history. Because of all of you in this room and others, we came together in 2020 to save democracy. As your president, I've been determined to keep America moving forward, not going back, to stand against hate and violence in all its forms, to be a nation where we not only live with but thrive on diversity, demonizing no one, leaving no one behind, and becoming the nation that we profess to be. I also ran to rebuild the backbone of America, the middle class. I made a commitment to you that I be a president for all Americans, whether you voted for me or not. We have done that. Studies show the major bills we have passed actually delivered more to red states than blue, because the job of the president is to deliver to all of America. And because of you, and I'm not exaggerating, because of you, we've had one of the most extraordinary 4 years of progress ever, period. When I say we, I mean Kamala and me. Just think about it. COVID no longer controls our lives. We've gone from economic crisis to the strongest economy in the entire world. Record 16 million new jobs. Record small business growth. Record high stock market. Record high 401ks. Wages up and inflation down, way down, and continuing to go down. The smallest racial wealth gap in 20 years. And yes, we both know we have more to do, but we're moving in the right direction. More Americans have peace of mind that comes from having health insurance. More Americans have health insurance today than ever before in American history. And after, as a young senator beginning to fight for 50 years to give Medicare the power to negotiate low prescription drug prices, we finally beat Big Pharma. And guess who cast the tie-breaking vote? Vice President, soon-to-be President Kamala Harris. And now it's the law of the land. Instead of paying $400 a month for insulin, seniors with diabetes will pay $35 a month. The law we passed already includes, starting in January, every senior's total prescription cost can be capped at $2,000 no matter how expensive the drugs they have. And what we don't focus on, and our Republican friends don't seem to understand, our reforms don't just save seniors money, they save the American taxpayers money. You know what we just passed saved? It saved $160 billion over the next decade. That's not hyperbole. It's because Medicare no longer has to pay those exorbitant prices to the Big Pharma. But look, thank you, Kamala, too. Look, folks, how can we have the strongest economy in the world without the best infrastructure in the world? Donald Trump promised Infrastructure Week every week for 4 years, and he never built a damn thing. But now, because of what Kamala and I have done, remember we were told we couldn't get it done. Remember when we came into office, we couldn't get anything passed? But right now, we're giving America an infrastructure decade, not week. We're modernizing our roads, our bridges, our ports, our airports, our trains, our buses. We're removing every lead pipe from schools and homes so every child can drink clean water. We're providing affordable high-speed internet for every American, no matter where they live, not unlike what Roosevelt did with electricity. And so much more. We are uniting the country. We're growing our economy. We're improving our quality of life. And we're building a better America. Because that's who we are. How can we be the strongest nation in the world without leading the world in science and technology? After years of importing 90% of our semiconductor chips from abroad, which America invented those chips, our Chips and Science Act meant that private companies from around the world are now investing literally tens of billions of dollars to build new chip factories right here in America. And over that period, they'll create tens of thousands of jobs. And many of those jobs in the so-called fabs, the buildings that make the chips, that's being constructed now. And guess what? The average salary in those fabs, size of a football field, will be over $100,000 a year, and you don't need a college degree. Because of you and so many electeds out there, American manufacturing is back. Where the hell to say we wouldn't lead the world in manufacturing? 800,000 new manufacturing jobs. Our Republican friends and others made sure they'd go abroad to get the cheapest labor. We used to import products and export jobs. Now we export American products and create American jobs. Right here in America, where jobs belong. With every new job, with every new factory, pride and hope is being brought back to communities throughout the country that were left behind. You know you're from them, many of you. You know what it's like when that factory closed, where your mother, your father, your grandmother, grandfather worked. And now you're back, providing once again, proving that Wall Street didn't build America, the middle class built America, and unions built the middle class. It's been my view since I came to the Senate. And that's why I'm proud to have been the first president to walk a picket line and be labeled the most pro-union president in history, and I accept it. It's a fact. Because when unions do well, we all do well. You got it, man. You got it. I agree. I'm proud. Look, remember he told we couldn't get anything done because we couldn't get anything done in the Congress? Well, with your support, we passed the most significant climate law in the history of mankind. Over $370 billion. Cutting carbon emissions in half by 2030. Launching a climate corps, similar to AmeriCorps and Peace Corps, creating tens of thousands of jobs for young people of the future who are going to make sure this continues. Creating hundreds of thousands of jobs in clean energy for American workers, including the IBEW installing 500,000 charging stations all across America. And in the process, reducing carbon emissions. And we're seeing it. We're seeing to it that the first beneficiaries of environmental initiatives are those fence-lined communities that have been smothered by the legacy of pollution. Louisiana and Delaware, Route 9, all the factories, all those chemical factories are right next to the poorest neighborhoods. They're the ones we're going to bring back. And how? How can we be the greatest nation in the world without the best education system in the world? Donald Trump and the Republican friends, they not only can't think, they can't read very well. Seriously, think about it. Look at their Project 2025. They want to do away with the Department of Education. Well, during the pandemic, Kamala and I helped states and cities get back their schools back open. And we gave public school teachers a raise. We created apprenticeships with businesses and communities, putting students on a path to a good paying job, whether or not they go to college. And by the way, we're making college a hell of a lot more affordable. Increasing Pell Grants by $900. Over $15 billion to HBCUs. Minority service education, including Hispanic institutions and tribal colleges. We kept our commitment to provide more student relief than ever by lifting the burden of helping millions of families buy a home and begin to build family wealth and contribute to the community and grow our economy. It's not costing us, it's creating more wealth. We fundamentally transformed how our economy grows, from the middle out and the bottom up instead of the top down. You know, my dad used to say there wasn't a whole hell of a lot to drop down on my kitchen table at the end of the month. I come from a basic middle-class family, 3-bedroom house, 4 kids, a grandpop living with us, decent neighborhood, but never a penny to spare. And look, that top-down notion never worked. A lot of Democrats didn't think it worked, thought it worked, but it doesn't. And when we did all that, what we've done, everybody can do well. Everybody. Donald Trump calls America a failing nation. No, I'm serious. But think about this. Think about this. He publicly says to the whole world, I'm going to say something outrageous. I know more foreign leaders by their first names and know them well than anybody alive. Just because I'm so damn old. But I'm not joking. Think of the message he sends around the world when he talks about America being a failing nation. He says we're losing. He's the loser. He's dead wrong. Many of you are very successful people who travel the world. Name me a country in the world that doesn't think we're the leading nation in the world. Without America, not a joke, think about it. I'm being literal. Who could lead the world other than the United States of America? Well, guess what? America's winning, and the world's better off for it. America's more prosperous, and Americans are safer today than were under Donald Trump. Trump continues to lie about crime in America, like everything else. Guess what? On his watch, the murder rate went up 30%, the biggest increase in history. Meanwhile, we made the largest investment, Kamala and I, in public safety ever. Now, the murder rate is falling faster than any time in history. Violent crime has dropped to the lowest level of more than 50 years. And crime will keep coming down when we put a prosecutor in the Oval Office instead of a convicted felon. And folks, the distinguished senator from the C Senate from California and I passed the first ban on assault weapons. And guess what? It worked. If we care about public safety, we need to prevent gun violence. and what makes me ashamed when I travel the world, which I do. More children in America are killed by a gunshot than any other cause in the United States. More die from a bullet than cancer, accidents, or anything else in the United States of America. My God. That's why Kamala and I are proud. We beat the NRA when we passed the first major bipartisan gun safety law in 30 years. I'm serious. That comes from here. And now it's time to ban assault weapons again. And demand universal background checks. It's hard. I never thought I'd stand before a crowd of Democrats and refer to a president as a liar so many times. No, I'm not trying to be funny. It's sad. Trump continues to lie about the border. Here's what he won't tell you. Trump killed the strongest bipartisan border deal in the history of the United States that we negotiated with the Senate Republicans. Took 4 weeks. Once it passed, and never acknowledged the most expansive border change in American history. He called senators to say, don't support the bipartisan bill, because he said it would help me politically and hurt him politically. My God. No, I'm serious. Think about it. Not a joke. Ask even the press who doesn't like me. They'll tell you that's true. Typically, Trump, once again, putting himself first and America last. Then I had to take executive action. The result of the executive action I took, border encounters have dropped over 50%. In fact, there are fewer border crossings today than when Donald Trump left office. And unlike Trump, we will not demonize immigrants, saying they're the poison of blood of America. Poison the blood of our country. Kamala and I are committed to strengthening legal immigration, including protecting dreamers and more. And here's what else I believe in. Protecting your freedom to vote, your freedom to love who you love. And your freedom to choose. In its decision overturning Roe v. Wade, as you heard earlier tonight, the United States Supreme Court majority wrote the following, quote, women are not without electoral or political power. No kidding. MAGA Republicans found out the power of women in 2022. And Donald Trump is going to find out the power of women in 2024. Watch. And where Trump and his mega Republican right-wingers seek to erase history, we Democrats continue to write history and make more history. I'm proud to have kept my commitment to appoint the first black woman in the United States Supreme Court. Ketanji Brown Jackson, a symbol for every young woman in America that you can do anything. I'm proud that I've kept my commitment to have an administration that looks like America and that taps in to the full talent of our nation. The most diverse cabinet in history, including the first black woman of South Asian descent to serve as vice president. and will soon serve as the 47th President of the United States. She is good. Look. Thank you, Kamala. Folks, I've long said we have many obligations as a nation, but I got in trouble years ago for saying I'd make no apologies. We have only one truly sacred obligation: to prepare and equip those we send to war and care for them and their families when they come home and when they don't. That's why I'm so proud to have written and signed the PACT Act, one of the most significant laws ever, helping veterans and their families exposed to toxic materials like burn pits in Agent Orange. I was around during the Vietnam War. It's hard. Nobody was able to prove that there's illness was a consequence of Agent Orange. And no one was able to prove initially that because they lived in burn pits like my son lived next to in Iraq for a year, that it was the cause of their illness. But because of the PACT Act, a surviving spouse with 2 children is now eligible for a stipend of about $3,000 a month. And those children who lost a parent are eligible for tuition benefits to go to college and to get job training. It's already helping over 1 million veterans and their families just so far. Well, I love them, and I'm so proud of my son's service. We get it. But guess who doesn't get it and doesn't respect our veterans? We know from his own chief of staff, the 4-star General John Kelly, that Trump, when in Europe, would not go to the grave sites in France. The brave service members who gave their lives to this country. He called them suckers and losers. Who in the hell does he think he is? Who does he think he is? There's no words for a person. They are not the words of a person not worthy of being commander-in-chief. Period. Not then, not now, and not ever. I mean that. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Just as no commander-in-chief should ever bow down to a dictator, the way Trump bows down to Putin. I never have, and I promise you, Kamala Harris will never do it. Will never bow down. When Trump left office, Europe and NATO was in tatters. Not a joke. America First doctrine changed our whole image in the world. Well, they gave the hours, about 190 hours, sum total, even my counterparts or heads of state in Europe, to strengthen NATO. We did. We united Europe like it hadn't been united for years, adding Finland and Sweden to NATO. 10 days before he died, Henry Kissinger called and said, not since Napoleon has Europe not looked over their shoulder at Russia with dread until now. Until now. Well, guess what? Putin thought he'd take Kyiv in 3 days. 3 years later, Ukraine is still free. When I came to office, the conventional wisdom was that China would inevitably surpass the United States. They haven't noticed. No one's saying that now. And we'll keep working to bring hostages home and end the war in Gaza and bring peace and security to the Middle East. As you know, I wrote a peace treaty for Gaza. A few days ago, I put forward a proposal that brought us closer to doing that than we've done since October 7th. We're working around the clock, my Secretary of State, to prevent a wider war and reunite hostages with their families and surge humanitarian health and food assistance into Gaza now. To end the civilian suffering of the Palestinian people and finally deliver a ceasefire and end this war. Those protesters out in the street, they have a point. A lot of innocent people are being killed on both sides. Just as we worked around the clock to bring home wrongfully detained Americans and others from Russia in one of the most complicated swaps in history, but they're home. Kamala and I are going to keep working to bring all Americans wrongfully detained around the world home. I mean it. Folks, I've got 5 months left in my presidency. I've got a lot to do. I intend to get it done. It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more. I love my country more. And all this talk about how I'm angry at all those people who said I should step down, that's not true. I love my country more, and we need to preserve our democracy. In 2024, we need you to vote. We need you to keep the Senate. We need you to win back the House of Representatives. And above all, we need you to beat Donald Trump. And elect Kamala and Tim President and Vice President of the United States of America. Look, they'll continue to lead America forward, creating more jobs, standing up for workers, growing the economy, lower the cost to American families so they just have a little more breathing room. We've made incredible progress, but we have more work to do. And Kamala and Tim will continue to take on corporate greed and bring down cost of food. They'll keep taking on Big Pharma, making insulin $35 a month, not just for seniors, but for everyone in America. And capping prescription drug costs at a total of $2,000, not just for seniors, but for everyone. And folks, that's going to save America again tens of billions of dollars. Folks, they'll make housing more affordable, building 3 million new homes, providing $25,000 down payment assistance for the first-time home buyer, more than the 10 we approved. Donald Trump wants a new tax on imported goods, food, gas, clothing, and more. You know what that will cost the average family, according to the experts? $3,900 a year in a tax. No, that's a fact. Kamala and Tim will make the child care tax credit permanent. Lifting millions of children out of poverty. and helping millions of families get ahead. But you know what Trump has? He created the largest debt any president had in 4 years with his $2 trillion tax cut for the wealthy. Well, Trump has a new plan. He wants to provide a $5 billion tax cut for corporations and the very wealthy. Read it. Put us further in debt. And folks, you know we have 1,000 billionaires in America. You know what their average tax rate they pay? 8.2%. If we just increased our taxes we proposed to 25%, which isn't the highest tax rate even, it would raise $500 billion new dollars over 10 years. They'd still be very wealthy. Look, Kamala and Tim are going to make them pay their fair share. They'll protect Social Security and Medicare. Trump wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. Kamala and Tim will protect your freedom. They'll protect your your right to vote. They'll protect your civil rights. And you know Trump will do everything to ban abortion nationwide. Oh, he will. You know Kamala and Tim will do everything they possibly can. That's why you have to elect the Senate and the House to restore Roe v. Wade. The ancient Greeks taught us that character is destiny. Character is destiny. For me and Jill, we know Kamala and Doug are people of character. It's been our honor to serve alongside them. And we know that Tim and Gwen Walz are also people of great character. Selecting Kamala was the very first decision I made when I became our nominee. And it was the best decision I made my whole career. We've not only gotten to know each other, we've become close friends. She's tough, she's experienced, and she has enormous integrity. Enormous integrity. Her story represents the best American story. And like many of our best presidents, she was also vice president. That's a joke. But she'll be a president our children can look up to. She'll be a president respected by world leaders because she already is. She'll be a president we can all be proud of. And she will be an historic president who puts her stamp on America's future. This will be the first presidential election since January 6th. On that day, we almost lost everything about who we are as a country. And that threat, this is not hyperbole, that threat is still very much alive. Donald Trump says he will refuse to accept the election result if he loses again. Think about that. He means it. Think about that. He's promising a bloodbath if he loses, in his words. And that he'll be a dictator on day one, in his own words. By the way, this sucker means it. No, I'm not joking. Think about it. Anybody else said that in the past, you'd think he was crazy. He is crazy, but you'd think it was an exaggeration, but he means it. We can't let that happen. Folks, all of us carry a special obligation. Independents, Republicans, Democrats. We saved democracy in 2020, and now we must save it again in 2024. The vote of each of us cast this year will determine whether democracy and freedom will prevail. It's that simple. It's that serious. And the power is literally in your hands. History is in your hands. Not hyperbole. It's in your hands. America's future is in your hands. Let me close with this. Nowhere else in the world could a kid with a stutter and modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claymont, Delaware, grow up to sit behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. That's because America is and always has been a nation of possibilities. Possibilities. We must never lose that. Never. Kamala and Tim understand that this nation must continue to be a place of possibilities, not just for the few of us, but for all of us. But join me in promising your whole heart to this effort, and where my heart will be. I promise I'll be the best volunteer Harris and Walsh has Cam ever seen. Each of us has a part in the American story. For me and my family, there's a song that means a lot to us, that captures the best of who we are as a nation. The song is called American Anthem. There's one verse that stands out, and I can't sing worth a damn, so I'm not going to try. I'll just quote it. The work and prayers of centuries have brought us to this day. What shall our legacy be? What will our children say? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. I've made a lot of mistakes in my career, but I gave my best to you. For 50 years, like many of you, I've given my heart and soul to our nation. And I've been blessed a million times in return with the support of the American people. I've either been too young to be in the Senate because I wasn't 30 yet, and too old to stay as president. But I hope you know how grateful I am to all of you. I can honestly say, and I mean this from the bottom, give you my word as a Biden, I can honestly say I'm more optimistic about the future than I was when I was elected as a 29-year-old United States Senator. I mean it. Folks, we just have to remember who we are. We're the United States of America. And there's nothing we cannot do when we do it together. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
All right. Well, that was something of a long farewell from President Joe Biden. Any thoughts on the...
Michael, wake up. Michael.
Well, my only complaint is it wasn't long enough. I loved that the man took his final moment on the big political stage to remind people about his daughter's scandalous diary and, his showers with her. He avoided that basically his whole presidency. Said, this is the moment to debut Ashley Biden. And then he comes out there, he recites the litany that he's been going on about for the past 3 years. And then there was one moment, though, because they were applauding him, giving him a nice big standing ovation. The moment you could see that he turned a little bit negative and started moving on was when they said, "Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe." And it's because they were thanking him for quitting and getting out of the race. I have never before seen a man speak at his own funeral. That was a first.
That's what I was going to say is, when they had Jill and then Ashley, it kind of felt like a memorial service vibe. And then I thought we were going into the celebration of life. And what we got was George Costanza's dad, Frank Costanza, at Festivus saying, "I got a lot of problems with you people." And he screamed at us for, I don't even know how long.
It was a very angry speech.
Long, very screamy speech. And it was like every lie that he's ever told, other than maybe like corn pop or something, but almost every lie like packed in and just peppered randomly throughout. And the fact that this is his legacy speech is kind of astonishing.
One thing that was very interesting, I thought, was the fact that he obviously mentioned Trump considerably more than he actually mentioned Kamala.
Yeah.
And when he mentioned Kamala, it wasn't really in the context of she has done all of these things with me, or she has accomplished this during her time. The only times he mentioned Kamala were Kamala will do this in the future. And I think it's a clear strategy from the Democratic side, you got to think, of them saying, hey, hype up Kamala, but don't tie her to you.
Right.
Talk about her in an aspirational way and that she will continue or be better than what I was doing. And I think that's worth noting there.
Well, think about his legacy, too. This really was the farewell. It's very fitting for Joe Biden to close by using someone else's words. And he said, I gave my best to America. But notice he didn't point to any particular accomplishments. He made up a bunch of numbers about his presidency. But, the man's been in public life for 54 years. As he said, he was elected to the Senate at age 29. So you'd think since 1972, he would have some real serious legislative accomplishments, especially in the Senate, that he could point to. And he's got nothing. The one legislative accomplishment he might have pointed to was that crime bill in the 90s. It was the one good thing he ever did, and then he's got to run away from it because the Democrats want to now abolish the prisons and let the criminals run free. So it's a real... If anything is going to make me feel bad for Joe Biden, it's that this man has given the majority of his rather lengthy life to national politics, and he really hasn't accomplished anything. If he had, he would have mentioned it tonight at his valedictory.
Well, and part of what really stuck out to me was the dissonance of hearing him talk about protests with anti-Semitic bile, as if he didn't know what was going on outside the DNC earlier today.
That was for me, where he was like, there's no place for political violence, and we're the party of peace. And then, like, outside, there are thousands and thousands of protesters, even more expected tomorrow. The whole speech was just a complete disconnect from reality.
I personally liked the moment when he said, innocent people in the Israel and Gaza conflict are dying on both sides. Right after he said, Donald Trump claimed that at Charlottesville there were good people on both sides.
Yeah.
He's kind of doing
which
his
was
own
false, but
people,
he
which
actually
not a real
was
claim.
saying that.
It has been actually debunked by people on the left. Like, it's gotten to the point where they've even gone, yeah, that never happened. And he still said that. And as you guys know, as an economic person, the 8% tax rate, income tax for billionaires, that is a completely made up thing that the White House put out there. If there was an 8% tax rate, trust me, I would have figured it out. It doesn't exist, and yet still repeating these lies over and over again.
Michael, what are we going to see from Joe Biden for the next 78 days?
Nothing ever again.
Will we see? Is this truly the final hurrah? What comes now?
This is it. He did muster some energy. And I noticed this. I was at the State of the Union this year, and so I was locked in the room and got to hear it firsthand. And he was really amped up at the State of the Union. And so he had this energy, whatever cocktail they shot him with, but it was all one note. And you heard a similar thing tonight. Biden can rouse the energy, even at this late hour, 11:30 Central Time, but he can only do it if he does it kind of like this. So if you hear him again, it will be in that tone. It will be at that volume. But I think this was it. I mean, to your point, Carol, it did feel like a funeral. Even when his daughter was speaking before, I sure will miss when Dad took us fishing or whatever, and it's a political funeral. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Joe. Now, bye-bye.
Yeah. In the words of Ashley Biden, I sure will miss when I got to be on set with you lovely people all evening. Carol Roth, Michael Knowles, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Megan Basham, my wonderful co-host for this evening. We have a lot more coming. We're just getting started with our Election Wire DNC coverage. Tomorrow, we're going to have Byron Donalds and Laura Trump joining the show, and a whole lot more from the Daily Wire Election Wire coverage of the DNC. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you tomorrow.